Good evening, everyone. We are in the regular business meeting of the District of Squamish for Tuesday, July 17th. Health and Swallow and Peace Class Squamish, Whale Whale. Welcome to the traditional territory of the Squamish Nation. There is an agenda in front of Council. I'm looking for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Cryer. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Are there any notices of motion? Seeing none, we have a few delegations, petitions, and proclamations. And first up, we have Amy Fast and Jacqueline McNichol. Is Jacqueline here too? No, just Amy. To ask for a proclamation to declare August 2nd to 6th as Squamish Days Lawyers Sports Festival in the district of Squamish. Amy, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, Mayor. Yes, so we're back again, 61st year of Squamish Days Lager Sports Festival. I've not been a part of it the entire 61 years, but I have been for a very long time and very proud to be a volunteer along with over 300 other volunteers that put together the festival every year. We're completely volunteer run, and not only do we act as a fundraiser for local organizations, but I think that the festival is a great showcase of our logging heritage and also our very vibrant community spirit. Last year we were able to raise over $30,000 for local organizations. And we partner each year with currently 6 organizations: the Royal Canadian Legion, the Rotary Club, Squamish Elks, the Howe Sound Curling Club, Squamish Valley Equestrian Association, and the Royal Canadian Marine Search and Rescue, and they donate their time as volunteers to help organize the event, and at the end of it they receive a portion of the profit. So, and then we also select a few other charities to receive additional funds each year. So we're hoping that Mayor and Council will proclaim August 2nd to 6th Squamish Days Lager Sports Festival.
Let me think about that. No, in all seriousness, this is one of the great weekends of the summer for Squamish. It has been for 60+ years. Like you said, at the chamber event, you've been involved in this before you were even born.
My mother was volunteering when she was pregnant.
Yes. So yeah, I'm happy to move forward this proclamation, seconded by Councillor Chappelle. Anyone want to say anything about the event?
Yes.
Councillor.
And bravo, of course, to all the volunteers. My wife's volunteered there a little bit. I've never volunteered there, but I think out of the 35 years I've been here, I've probably gone there 30 times. Never gets boring.
And you're volunteering this year, right?
I'm volunteering in Europe.
Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Amy. When I was acting in the mayor's position in May, I attended a film premiere of the grade 2-3 class in Darkendale, and they were talking about their 3 favorite things they loved about Squamish, and Lager Sports. Peter was there. Must have been in 85% of those films. It really is a standout for our community, and it really resonates with the kids in our community and our families.
Great to hear. Thank you.
Thanks. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Here's for looking for good weather.
Yes, not too hot.
Yeah, 25 degrees.
Exactly. Thank you.
Not like
Thank you very much, and thank all the volunteers too that put their heart and soul into this and have for decades. Thank you very much. Thanks. Next up, we have a request to proclaim September 23rd and 29th, 2018 as Railway Safety Week in the District of Squamish. Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Chappelle. Do we know if there's any information about how they plan to raise awareness? Maybe closer to the date, we'll actually ask them to come and speak to the railway safety issues.
Absolutely.
Awesome, thank you. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Any motion carries. We are on to public hearings. First up, we have zoning bylaw public hearings. We're doing one public hearing for all 4, correct, Jonas? One public hearing for all.
Yes.
All of the amendments on the zoning bylaw.
That's different about
I think this is just feedback on the bylaw. New ones? Okay, so it's not amended to the agenda, it's just additional information. So just before we end the public hearing, as always, I have to read this statement. This public hearing is convened pursuant to Part 14, Division 3 of the Local Government Act to allow the public to make representations to Council respecting matters contained in District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011 amendment bylaw 2018 miscellaneous amendments number 2607, 2018 District of Squamish zoning bylaw 2200-2011 amendment bylaw electric vehicle charging amendments number 2610, 2018 District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011 amendment bylaw cannabis amendments number 2611, 2018, and District of Squamish zoning bylaw number 2200-2011 amendment bylaw cannabis production number 2618, 2018. Everyone present shall be given a reasonable opportunity to be heard or to present written submissions respecting matters contained in the proposed bylaw. No one will be discouraged or prevented from making their views known. However, it is important that remarks be restricted to matters contained in the proposed bylaw. Members of council may ask questions following the presentations. However, the function of council at a public hearing is to listen rather than to debate the merits of the proposed bylaw. In considering the proposed bylaw, council has received documents which may influence its decision. These documents are available for review and comment and have been included as part of the planning department report, or if received later, handed out at the meeting and included in the public hearing package. If any documents are submitted during the hearing, please feel free to review the document during the hearing by asking staff. Members of the public shall maintain order and quiet and shall not applaud or interrupt any speech or action of members of council or any other persons addressing council. I now call on the planning department to introduce the bodies.
Thanks, Mayor Heitzman. Good evening, Mayor and Council and members of the public. My name is Aisha Philp. This is Carrie Hamilton, Jesse Fletcher, and we're planners in the Community Planning and Infrastructure Department. And tonight we're here to present the information for the public hearing on the 2018 Omnibus, which is basically a collection of housekeeping updates to our district zoning bylaw. So tonight we'll be speaking to the collection of zoning amendment bylaws which cover the following topics. First up is miscellaneous amendments. Second, electric vehicle charging. Third, retail cannabis. And fourth, cannabis production. And just to note that no changes have been made since the bylaws received first and second readings on June 19th. So just a bit of background, the 2018 Omnibus was driven by the anticipated decriminalization of commercial cannabis through the Cannabis Act, which was recently passed by the federal government this past June and is likely coming into effect this fall. The provincial government has also provided information on how it will regulate cannabis at the provincial level. The district has been regulating dispensaries since 2016 and production facilities since 2012. With the new Cannabis Act and the provincial information, district staff have identified some areas of local land use regulation for cannabis that could be improved and brought into alignment with these forthcoming federal and provincial regulations. And also through this process, there was a number of other housekeeping items and improvements that were brought forward, and these are also included in this omnibus. So to start off, there was a suite of downtown C4 zoning amendments which were adopted by council this past March. These included regulations around floor area ratio and upper story setbacks, and these applied to properties fronting Cleveland Avenue from Pemberton Avenue down to Main Street. These amendments excluded the Chieftain Plaza and surrounding properties which are just north of Pemberton Avenue. And so here we're proposing to extend the Cleveland character area to cover all C4 zone properties which front Cleveland up to Buckley Avenue. And this would capture these three properties that are outlined in red on the map. And next up, we're proposing to amend the residential small lot zone, so that's the RS3 zone. The current zoning metrics have allowed for larger than anticipated homes to be built. The original intent of the RS3 zone was for smaller and hopefully more affordable dwellings to be located on these small infill lots. The following table outlines the proposed changes to the RS3 zone. So staff are suggesting to reduce the lot coverage as well as density, or FAR, as well as slightly increase the interior side setback, and all of these measures will hopefully encourage smaller homes on these infill lots. And specifically, the proposed maximum density regulation would be the lesser of either 0.45 FAR or 162 square meters or 1,750 square feet. And also the upper story would not be able to exceed 80% of the lower story. And that's to help with massing. So moving on, the zoning bylaw currently contains height bonuses and density bonuses around increased energy efficiency. And so to align our zoning bylaw with the new BC Energy Step Code that we recently put into our building bylaw, it's proposed that the bonuses be updated so that buildings that go for these bonuses would need to go one energy step higher than whatever the current minimum step is required in the building bylaw.
So the district introduced multi-unit flex units as a new form of housing as part of the 2017 zoning bylaw update. And these are essentially units that could go in duplexes or townhouses. Staff are proposing amendments that would clarify that these flex units would be permitted in the RS2 zone and all townhouse zones. Staff are also proposing to permit secondary suites in duplexes, which the building code allows for under certain conditions. The difference between a secondary suite and a flex unit in a duplex is the location and rating of the firewalls. For clarification and for improved neighborhood compatibility, staff are also proposing to limit the number of work vehicles associated with a home-based business to 2 vehicles maximum. And finally, staff are removing the condition that only allows a carriage house to achieve a height of 6.7 meters if it is situated above a garage. This does not increase the permitted floor area of a carriage house, as garages were permitted in addition to the maximum floor area permitted for a carriage house. Currently, the district requires that a minimum of 30% of required parking stalls in multifamily developments have shared access to an electric vehicle charging receptacle. The proposed amendments would require that 100% of stalls in shared parking facilities are equipped with electric vehicle charging infrastructure, which would be able to facilitate level 2 charging receptacles in the future. This would be in addition to the existing requirement for access to receptacles. New information since second reading is presented in red on the slide, as staff have discovered additional cost considerations. These costs will primarily affect mid-sized wood frame construction, which is the primary form of apartment in Squamish. The 100% rough-in requirement will require that these buildings install a larger hydro service substation than what is typically seen, and this is estimated to cost as much as $400,000.
So now to the proposed bylaw amendments for cannabis. The district has regulated marijuana dispensaries since 2016, and the proposed update to the zoning bylaw is to ensure consistency with the Cannabis Act and make some adjustments to existing regulations so that retail cannabis continues to be thoughtfully located throughout our community. To comply with the Cannabis Act, staff are proposing the following definition changes. They include change all reference of marijuana to cannabis and change the term marijuana dispensary to cannabis retail. Staff have also found that the definition of school is too vague, and with these changes, staff are proposing a clear definition of school that will capture all primary and secondary schools. Currently, the locations of dispensaries or cannabis retail are regulated by a number of conditions listed on the slide. Staff recommend that the district maintain the buffer approach to ensure that cannabis retail is permissible, yet continues to be thoughtfully located throughout our community. With this rezoning, staff are advising to add 2 additional conditions to these existing buffers. 1, to exclude their location within 300 meters to the north, east, and south of Brennan Park, aligning with the recent tobacconist vape shop regulations. And 2, to clarify that the restrictions on liquor stores and pharmacies in the Specialized Business Service Center, the I-9 zone, should also apply to dispensaries. This is because the dispensary use is consistent with uses such as liquor stores, grocery stores, and pharmacies that are already not permitted in the business park. These uses are better served in neighborhoods in close proximity to residential uses, to decrease vehicle traffic, increase safety with more eyes on the street, and to preserve the retail business park for employment uses that serve the business park during the daytime working hours. One last important note to make, the district currently has 4 active business licenses for dispensaries, and the operation of these dispensaries will not be affected by these changes. So moving to cannabis production, the district has regulated marijuana production facilities since 2012. Medical marijuana production is currently allowed in most industrial zones, and the legalization of recreational cannabis is likely to spur an increase in interest for cannabis production facilities throughout the district. So in order to help ensure the growth is in this specific use is thoughtfully located throughout our community, staff are proposing to take a similar approach as has been successfully applied with the cannabis dispensaries by adding conditions to this use. The proposed amendments include regulation to ensure the facilities are built to contain glare, noise, and smell, to not permit them in downtown, to add a 150-meter school buffer and a 60-meter residential buffer, and also to add a 200-meter distancing requirement between cannabis production facilities to preserve a diversity of uses on industrial zone land. These distances can always be varied by council, but this regulation provides council and the community the opportunity to provide feedback on facilities that would seek to vary this regulation. It also provides the users of industrial land some security and potentially market stability to ensure a diversity of industrial uses are still supported throughout the industrial park. Lastly, we included specific cannabis production parking regulations, which are 2 stalls per 100 meters squared. So this slide shows the downtown area within the red lines where production would not be supported. And while the business park area within the red lines will allow for the production. The 200-meter buffer between production facilities will allow for about 4 to 6 facilities within the business park. So staff have implemented a consult level on IAP2 participation spectrum for this project. An open house was held on the House Sound Inn and Pub on June 7th to present the zoning amendment proposal and solicit community input. The feedback from the open house was constructive and generally supportive of the proposed changes. So for the public hearing, staff have mailed notifications within a 100-meter radius of the I-9 zone, the downtown Cleveland properties, and all existing dispensaries. 2 consecutive ads were published in the chief newspaper, and 3 comments were received. One of them was not in support of the I-9 change, one not in support of the height amendment to the carriage houses, and a 3rd letter suggests that a child care facility should be included in the definition of school. So this concludes our presentation for the purpose of public hearing.
Thank you. Questions from council for clarification purposes? Councilor Chabot?
Yes, the fronting Cleveland, we had previously discussed changing that so it was not just fronting Cleveland, but any building on Cleveland, so that people can put them on in the back or side of the same buildings that are fronting Cleveland
Are you talking about?
in the marijuana bylaw.
Okay.
Through you, Mayor, currently the way the regulation is written, any parcel that has frontage on Cleveland is
That's
not permitted to have cannabis
Thank you.
retail.
Just wanted to clarify that.
Councilor Lee?
For the last bylaw on cannabis production, I know we're stipulating in there that it can't produce glare, noise, smell outside of its boundaries. If we already have conflicts because of a cannabis production facility, if conflicts arise and smell or noise or glare is going over property lines, what is our recourse?
If we're talking so it would be our regular bylaw enforcement recourse. I know a question arose earlier whether it would affect existing businesses, and we have confirmed that it would for businesses that have business licenses. Would affect those businesses, any regulations that are in the business license bylaw, so long as those regulations don't result in the shutting down of the business, basically. So as long as they're not too onerous on a business, then they would be still enforceable.
So I'm not totally clear, I'm sorry. If I'm a new cannabis production, I set up in the business park, and my neighbors start complaining because of light and smell, let's say. The district can shut me down if I don't improve because by not offering me a business license?
So we would issue the business license ideally before it opens.
But I can renew my business license.
And if you renew the business license, the way the bylaw is written is that if the glare and the smell is receptible at the property line, then we would be able to enforce the regulations. So in some cases, yes, if there was non-compliance and the operator was not taking any steps towards compliance, we would revoke the business license or suspend the business license.
Is
this the case for any business in the business park, for example? A brewery, anything else? This is just specific to?
No, this is specific to production facilities.
Council, any other? Councilor Schmelz changing the sabotage chair.
Again.
Any other questions for staff at this point before I go out to the public? Councilor Elliott?
One more on the RS3 zoning. I know we're trying to control massing by suggesting 80% on the second level. But in order to make these houses smaller and appeal to people who want a more affordable home, can you still fit 3 bedrooms in that size? Because what it does is it limits it for families who want to have all their children to be on the same floor as the master bedroom. So I want to make sure that we're not creating a design that actually doesn't appeal to families.
I'm just trying to do the math.
I know, I was trying to do
But
that.
it's likely achievable. Sorry, do you want to add?
It's 750 square feet, split over 2 levels, but the top one can only be 80%.
Yeah. So 800 square feet on an upper story, or 80% of 80 square feet. Jesse, do you want to add anything?
Be really clear about what the regulations say.
Through you, Mayor, the regulations say that the maximum floor area is 0.45 FAR or 162 square meters of floor area, whichever is less. And so depending on the lot size, if you were to achieve the 162 square meters, which I believe is sort of the average that we're seeing, that is larger than your average apartment. We would, and there's also an exclusion for a garage, so you'd likely be able to achieve 2 bedrooms. It might not be as large as a 2,000 square foot home, but you're looking at about 1,600 square feet. So, and there are.
But for young families that have 2 children that want 3 bedrooms on the upper story, I'm just trying to make sure that through our massing regulation, we're not including a 3-bedroom home that's small.
Maybe I can just go and do the crunch numbers really quickly and then come back. Is that all right?
Absolutely. We just need the information by hand.
Yeah, let me go. I just can't do math in my head.
You need all your fingers, I understand. Any other questions, Councilor Pratt?
Yeah, I just, on the one slide on the battery charging one there was a red paragraph there that said was added. I was just, that cost per stall, are you just replacing the number we have in here with that number?
Through you, Mayor, correct. We, through our research, we hadn't become aware until more recently that there might be an additional charge to upgrade the hydro service. So currently most 4 to 6 story apartment buildings are serviced with a hydro kiosk. In this case, they may be serviced with a much larger hydro service, which is an additional approximately $400,000, which based on 99 stall apartment building would increase that $2,600 number up to $6,600.
But what does that have to do with us?
It doesn't have anything to do
Yeah.
with the district, it's just an.
Just information.
Correct.
And that's a very theoretical number at this point with technology and smart systems of making sure you're not over-taxing an energy supply at any given time. Those systems are coming into place. My personal opinion is that it certainly adds that value any condominium in the future. Yeah.
Well, just to that point, when we start building thousands of units in the downtown, we have to just make sure that we have enough hydro for them all.
Any other questions from council at this point? I don't see any. I have one speaker on my list. So first up is Carl Funk. Welcome, and state your name and your address, and if you represent yourself, a business or organization.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Sorry. My name is Carl Funk. I'm with Solterra Development. I'm representing 1257 Commercial Way. I have some concerns still with the restriction of I-9 for the cannabis, retail cannabis zoning. I'm going to speak my understanding of the zoning just in case I could be incorrect on it. But my understanding is that cannabis retail will be allowed in any zone that allows retail currently, but it has to meet the buffer restrictions, as well as restrictions on Cleveland, and that's my understanding of it. So buffer separations, I totally understand that. That follows planning logic and rationale. I still have concerns about the I-9 zoning restrictions even after the explanation, primarily because I-9 is one of the locations in Squamish that allows retail, and it naturally meets all those buffers already. It meets the buffers from parks and schools, and further than that, it also meets what's going to meet future changes when there's locations in other parts of Squamish that allow retail. As there's further pressure from residential, you will see more change for pressure for more services such as parks, and with a higher chance of land use conflict rather than I-9. So that's my biggest concern with it, and I hope it's thought through by council. And my second more comment is those buffers are fairly restrictive in a relatively compact area such as Squamish. So a 300-meter buffer from a school park is, and the biggest one is from another retail cannabis location. So if you take a location on Second Avenue and draw a 300-meter radius around it, it becomes a circle of 600-meter diameter that almost encompasses the whole downtown. It's going to be difficult to fit multiple locations in the downtown, which is not good or bad. It's just what's going to follow the policy. And that policy is consistent with other legislation, so I understand that. But I think there might be a concern with more viability of other locations for retail cannabis. Some areas, some people might try to locate retail cannabis in areas where it might not be ideal. And maybe I-9, since it already meets that, all those buffers, to me it just makes like perfect sense. So I didn't see that rationale before. I was looking for the rationale of why I-9 was excluded, and I was trying to understand where the plan was coming from, so I see that. But I'm still left with a question of how is that different from other commercial retail spots in Squamish? There's zoning, lots of CD zoning, as well as other commercial zoning that have similar characteristics as what's stated by planning, saying that I-9 should be excluded for these reasons. However, I-9 is the only one that's excluded, and I do have concern with that. And yeah, so it's mainly more for council to, I hope they consider that. My other issue is just in terms of process. This zoning amendment specifically impacts our property. We have our property, and it's the zoning amendment that adds a restriction on our land entitlements. So when I see the community engagement, I totally agree that the district followed what they had to for legislative requirements for notification. I do think in this situation, it's not talking about a property next door. It's not talking about something that's going on beside us. It's specifically our property. I think we have a good relationship with staff. I wish we would have got a phone call to okay, this is what we're thinking. Solterra, this is our rationale behind it. Do we think this is in the public's best interest? What are your thoughts? Let's talk about it. I think that would have been helpful. And we've been invited to other stuff by plenty of staff, and it's been awesome. So we think really highly of them. I think just in this case, it could have been handled differently. Take it through consideration.
Councilor Craig, do you have a specific question for the
Well,
speaker?
I don't mind listening to staff first.
Well, we're just going to go to more speakers, and
Okay,
then
well, I'd
we'll...
like to see the map showing the business park, please.
So if we're going to, I guess, go down, generally we try to get a whole bunch of speakers, and we'll get, why don't we do that?
Well, I'd like to get that, so
Well,
go ahead, get the
Okay.
speakers.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak this public hearing? Yeah, come on up and state your street address and if you represent yourself, business, or an organization.
Damien Lustig, 37767 Second Avenue, as well as our business is located on 37738 Third Avenue. I guess I represent quite a few people in my community who have been here before you before. And some of my concerns are, I absolutely agree with Minister Solterra, restricting another piece of land from these retail dispensaries or cannabis retail doesn't make a terrible amount of sense to me. The 300-meter buffer zone essentially doesn't allow these retail businesses to be in an area where they're in the public view. In the last 7 months, we've seen a lot of automatic weapons, police cars, roads closed down. A woman get an automatic weapon pointed in her face. These types of businesses need to be in those locations where they're in the public view. Without them there, we're looking at the same problems that we've had, essentially. We put them somewhere where it's easy to take advantage of the amount of cash that's on site and the amount of product that's sitting on site, and it's a recipe for somebody to be injured. And as safety being a priority, being out in the open makes things a lot more safe than forcing these businesses into the corners. As far as the production goes, they're good neighbors. I'm going to say they're very respectful. They don't cause any problems. They don't bring any trouble with them. Yes, they need to regulate how they operate their businesses. However, kicking them all out of downtown, I don't think is the way forward. The rest of the laws need to run their course before we do that. And I also believe that the stakeholders, and all of the stakeholders, in that matter, have been consulted as to these changes and what the effect will be for them. So that's almost all I have to say. I guess the other thing is these marijuana retail stores have no business anywhere where there is single-family homes, whether they're legally non-conforming or not. They shouldn't be anywhere near family residential. We've lived with it, we've seen what comes with it, and that's the honest to God truth. They need to be out in the open where the public can see them. We need to shorten up those boundaries because there's very few areas where they can have an exposed retail location that is not within 3 years of a school. And then once we take I-9 out of the loop, there's another chunk of land that just is not available for these businesses to be in the kind of atmosphere that they require. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? Yeah, please come up and state your name and address, and if you're representing yourself, a business or an organization.
Yes, thank you. My name is Alex Zabar. I'm a property owner in Cleveland Avenue. I don't live in Squamish, but I have some major holdings here. As an owner of commercial properties on Cleveland Avenue, I personally have no desire or intention to install a tenant who dispenses or retails any cannabis products, but I don't speak for other owners. So my preferences should not restrict my neighbor's preferences. I think individual owners should make their own decisions. I think as the population increases in Squamish and as density increases and more seniors move in, the downtown will become denser. It will become a popular area for people of all kinds, with a variety of health issues. And many of them will have prescriptions for medical cannabis. Now, I was given an excerpt from a petition that was filed some months ago, publicly available. It was proposed for Vancouver, but it has not been read yet. I'd like to read it out, if you don't mind. To the extent that these bylaws unduly restrict access to medical cannabis, they unjustifiably infringe the Section 7 Charter rights of the people who rely on medical cannabis and access it through dispensaries. Without access to a form and strain of medical cannabis that assists them, such individuals may be forced to do without their medical cannabis altogether and turn to prescription medication that is harmful or less effective. Or they will have to purchase their medical cannabis from a dealer or from a source that is more expensive or that provides a product of lower quality. These bylaws prohibit dispensaries unless they have been approved through the city's licensing and development permit process. As the city places restrictions on the number of and location of dispensaries, people may be placed in an inconvenient distance from their closest city-approved dispensary. As many patients are disabled, impoverished, or have difficulty moving about, this is a limitation placed upon them by the city. Furthermore, not every dispensary has the same product or quality of product or is staffed by equally knowledgeable persons. So I think this has a direct impact on, or this directly addresses what we're trying to do here, if we create an exclusionary zone that prevents people who need it from accessing it easily and reliably, then we can end up creating an area where people don't want to live. And so I don't want to represent anybody. I'm not making any representations for industry or for retailers. I just own property. I just rent it out. But my motto as a landlord is your success is my success. And if I can't have the retailer I want in my property, I can't own property. So I'm trying to speak as a landlord, trying to just be in business for myself, and like other landlords, have a choice of who I want in my own buildings. The reason I don't want a cannabis retailer in my building is because I think it damages the building. That has nothing to do whether the product is legal or whether or who they're selling it to or why they're there. It's just my opinion about the physical impact on the structure of the building. But that's me. I have other properties in downtown in Vancouver where there's a medical cannabis dispensary right next door to one of my properties, and it smells. It's awful. I really feel sorry for the person who owns that building, because when these guys leave, and they will leave eventually, he's going to have to tear the building down. He can't fix it. It's permeated every piece of wood in that building. But that's him. That's not me. And so if a business goes in and they prepare the building like a vault, you need a tank to get in there, so be it. They spend all the money they need to do to make their business successful. But that shouldn't be up to this. I don't think it should be the city that tells them they can't operate within a certain radius to the exclusion of everybody else. I think it also has a little bit of an impact on the definition of school-age kids, K to 12. What about kids under that age, kids over that age, university students? They're going to want to access this too. There's nothing you can do to stop it from becoming legal.
Hopefully not under that age.
We're not, no, but still, it goes beyond just the definition of cannabis. It goes beyond the restriction of where you can sell it, where you can buy it, who has access. Those are my comments.
I'm going to go, you want to speak specifically to the
Yes.
question? Yeah,
Yeah.
go ahead.
I kind of lost you there on, you're not representing yourself, you're representing your neighbors?
No, I'm representing myself. I'm not representing my neighbors. I'm just saying these are my opinions.
Yeah.
This piece that I read out to you
Yeah, so it's okay to have
was given
dispensaries.
to me by somebody who has some experience in the area. I can't speak to it because I'm not a lawyer, and I cannot answer any questions regarding that. It's just, it seemed to me that it made sense to bring this up in this meeting, and
But you'd think they should be allowed on Cleveland Avenue?
I think the
anywhere they
owners,
want.
I think the owners should be responsible for making that decision. The city restricts it too onerously, or too closely, then I think you can be sure you're going to have some challenges in court for people who are saying that it violates their Section 7 charter.
But considering that marijuana was a bad word a year ago, do you think we're not moving at a nice speed, or do you think we should just open it up?
That's not for me to
Council,
say.
it's not a dialogue between you and this particular person.
That's not for me to say.
Well, I just...
I've never used it. I
One
don't
more,
intend to
just
use
one
it.
last comment.
No comments.
When
We
you
have a
said-
question. We have a question.
People, you said people would not want to live here because there was not enough dispensaries. I had to...
No, I'm
say
saying that
something.
there's a certain section of the, maybe the senior population.
It's
I
not-
know
it's-
people. there are
Thank you.
Sorry.
I think he's being facetious, I believe, and it's not council's position to debate the merits at this point. If they have questions of clarification, that's fine, but council's prerogative or council's responsibility in a public hearing is not to debate the issue, but to ask questions if they need clarification. So unless you have something additional to add,
No,
I'll
that's fine.
No.
I wasn't asking you to fire. I know you do at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing at this point? I'm not going to close it, so don't worry. No? don't see any hands at the moment, but there were some questions. I'm wondering if staff, there was an insinuation that we're taking retail out of I-9, and maybe just clarify what I-9 permits currently with regard to retail?
Definitely. So I-9 actually permits retail uses, but under a specific condition, which is different than a lot of other primary retail uses that we have in retail zones. So it allows for retail store will be limited to businesses and employees serving goods and services. It excludes full-service grocery store, pharmacy, and liquor store. So it has specific conditions attached to it, and the rationale for those conditions are what staff presented earlier, is that these locations are not supportive due to traffic concerns that it might have, as well as some safety concerns specifically with the retail cannabis use.
So just to put a fine point on it, I-9 allows for specific retail to service the people who are working in the business park,
Yes.
so restaurants, that kind of thing. But it also allows for accessory retail sales. So if you have, for example, the beer parlors, they're producing beer, therefore they can have a portion of there as sales under the current zone.
Correct.
So we're not taking a use out of this zone per se. I just want to get clarification.
Yeah, technically, if we use having services that serve the businesses and the employees, technically it's not really an allowable use. What staff are proposing here is a clarification to really call this out as not an allowable use in this zone.
Okay, I just want to get clarification on that. There was, I'm just trying to remember some of the questions.
I have a list if you'd like to. There was another comment made around not having a lot of spaces for dispensaries. So I just want to clarify that we do have 4 dispensaries right now that have business licenses. 2 of them are in the downtown area, and that we have other areas as well that could be open to allowing retail cannabis, as well as the Mud 1 zone, which is actually quite close to the business park, and will be close to residential uses as well as a kind of a commercial center there. So there's a DP that was approved for that location as well, and that could definitely house cannabis retail. So we're not trying to exclude it from
Is
for
there a
that
neighborhood that has a commercial area, and the only commercial area is close to, within that 300 meters to a school, that would restrict cannabis sales in a particular neighborhood? Like Valley Cliff. There's only one commercial node in Valley Cliff. It's very close to the Waldorf School. So does that restrict cannabis sales in Valley Cliff, for example?
that could, as per the regulation, would restrict it. It's always open to have variances to that if council chooses to support something
So
to have a dispensary.
we suspect some of these applications might come back in a variance specifically allow for a dispensary, cannabis dispensary in a particular neighborhood or area.
Correct.
Okay. Councilor Carr. Oh, did you have a few more?
There was
Go ahead.
just one more from the last comment. I just wanted to clarify that medical cannabis won't be able to be sold at retail cannabis stores. It's going to be only sold online. So the concern around not being supportive to that community, it'll only be sold online for those medical needs.
I'm good, thanks. Most staff cleared up when I was.
Councilor Elliott.
One of the speakers brought up safety. It's my understanding that all the business is done through cash right now because it's not legal. And once it's legal, they can accept credit cards, bank cards, making transactions, and then the amount of cash on premises is a lot lower. Is that true? Potentially. I mean,
Suspect so.
That's the expectation that, similar to the United States, where some of the states have legalized the cannabis, they were able to go from a cash-based business to different types of transactions.
There might be still cash involved, just like Home Depot takes a credit card and your cash. They'll take anything, right?
Yeah,
but our cannabis retailers will be allowed to have a bank account.
absolutely.
Councilor Blackwell?
Yeah, I'm wondering, we had some comments about the US situation, and I'm just wondering if that is relevant. And if anybody in the audience might have something to say about that. But because I think in the US that there is still a lot of cash-based, even doing so, and I wonder if that also may be the case here, or if it's gonna be different.
We'll wait. You think you're an expert, and we'll allow it? I'll just ask the staff to respond to that. I mean, the thing with the federal implementation of this is they're taking a very staged approach in this. And as I met with Parliamentary Secretary Blair, who's in charge of this for the feds last week, he says this isn't an event, it's a process. This is just the first step in the process, including micro production sales similar to microbrews. That's still not going to be allowed for probably a year from the Fed. So the federal government is regulating a lot of this. The staff have a comment on if the federal regulations are going to create the cash economy, direct cash, or enable businesses. Does staff have any understanding of this? If not, that's okay. Just thought I'd ask you guys first.
Well, I think it's like any business, there's gonna be options. We don't know yet whether it's gonna result in no more cash, or is it gonna be still heavily based on cash, but there will be options to businesses and people who are purchasing it.
There are further requirements that will be required to get a business license for these, and they will comply with some of the new regulations that have come into place. And so they'll be required to show that they're meeting that standard in order to get a business license, which they didn't have to before. So that might also help.
Maybe I will ask Mr. Reiser to speak to this. My speculation is that in the beginning, because the United States predominantly it's still illegal, people will be hesitant to use something that's traceable, even though it's legal here, something that's traceable, whether it's on a credit card or a debit card or something like that. So I suspect a lot of this transaction will go cash still, but maybe Mr. Reiser will correct me.
Thank you very much, Mayor Heisman, for the opportunity. Just quickly, in the States, they still can't use bank cards because it's federally illegal. The advantage and forethought of Canada, when it's federally illegal, it will be allowed in the banking system. And as well, the stores that are operating now will not be operating in the future. It will be an entirely different setup right on every single level. The products, how it'll be regulated. So it'll be entirely different stores, and hopefully they'll be everywhere. So it won't be. Anyway, there'll be a lot of new challenges coming up.
Do you think a lot of the transactions will still be cash at the beginning?
So many people, people love their coins. People love their coins. They will forego private information in a second if they can get a token.
If they can get a flight somewhere, yeah. Thank you. A question for Mr. Ryder?
No, different question.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tom.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I read that municipalities will still have a veto over locations. And so how does this fit in with our zoning regulations? Like how does that all work together? So we're trying to regulate this so that people don't have to jump through too many hoops. They know where they can be and they can set up a business. But then I've also read in the provincial legislation that municipalities can maintain a veto on location of cannabis retail. Is that true?
Yes.
Go ahead, sure.
So the province has given municipalities the ability to regulate where they want these to go, or to say we entirely don't want them in our community. So I think
Okay, so that's
where the ability lies, is that the municipality has the power to determine how many, where they go. And this is our attempt at starting to formulate that.
And just on that, highly advised that all municipalities have some baseline bylaws in place prior to legalization in October.
Correct.
That certainly our lawyers and people who advise us are telling us these kinds of things. We're not just our municipality. Does staff have any understanding of the approach other municipalities are having? I certainly know most municipalities I know are just starting with a zero. We don't want anything and we'll slowly introduce them. But does staff have sort of a better understanding of where other municipalities are going with this?
I have looked into it. We did look into this when we brought forward dispensaries in 2016, and at the time we were, I believe, the third municipality in British Columbia to bring this forward and to allow for them, give them business licenses. With production, municipalities are taking a little bit of a different step. They're either spot zoning them, so you only are allowed to have the production facility if you come in for a rezoning, and they blanketly do not allow them. Not a lot of approaches, not a lot of municipalities have taken an open approach as we have. There are some that have taken, have included some residential buffers or have included some buffers from schools, as has been advised, but not a lot of them. We would be pretty progressive in this area.
Thanks. I'll go back up to the public to see if there's anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing. Yeah. Yeah, come up. Yeah.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify one thing. Currently, our zoning does allow retail. I agree with those conditions, no liquor store and pharmacy, and all that, but it currently does retail. And the zoning right now does allow any zone that allows retail to allow cannabis retail as long as it meets the buffer requirements. So there is a use being taken away. There's no doubt about that. It is incorrect to say that it's not. So I think I can understand the rationale. If there was other zones that allowed retail with our conditions, like no liquor store, no pharmacy, if those were restricted, I could kind of see where the district's coming from. But right now, it's not what's being presented as saying I-9 for these reasons. So that's where I have a hard time understanding the logic behind it. But I just want to say that there is a use being taken away. It is, because we are allowed retail except for those conditions, no liquor store. That's not in the zoning. So it doesn't say retail cannabis is allowed unless it's their own liquor store.
Maybe I'll get staff to clarify. My understanding is that any liquor sales is a spot zoning for liquor stores currently.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's in the zone because it was zone specifically for that use. It's not necessarily a permitted use.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But that's not what the cannabis retail zoning is regarding. It's regarding retail. It says nothing about liquor. So we're talking about two different things.
Just want to clarify that in the zone as a condition of use in I-9, it does say that retail store will be limited to businesses and employees serving goods and services. It excludes full-service grocery store, pharmacy, and liquor store. So we're adding cannabis under that sort of liquor provision,
But you
so
can't
it's
sell
not
cannabis
like
today,
it's
technically.
Yeah, we can.
No, you can't.
No, you can't.
No.
Okay, so the retail, maybe right now retail, sort of cannabis retail, marijuana dispensary, is it not allowed anywhere where there's retail?
It is, but the zone implies that these are only goods that service the business part, which wouldn't be a cannabis store.
It has a specific, like retail store has a definition, but the retail use in the I-9 zone has a specific condition to it. It's special, and this is what Jonas just read out and what I read out previously. And then this condition is that it's only allowed retail use if it's serving business and employees serving goods. And that is kind of vague, so I see what you're saying, but I believe that the way that is interpreted, that a cannabis retail would not be allowed in that use. So we're clarifying that, we're adding it and calling it out. But I
Because it's gonna be
understand
legal,
that,
technically.
exactly,
Oh, no.
correct.
Any other comments or questions?
No, that's it, thank you.
Yeah. Please come up, state your name. Yeah, go ahead.
Sasha Fabry, Grant Road. I'm wondering if council can elucidate a little bit on some of the reasoning for the 300-meter buffer. That's just the one part that isn't as clear to me as the rest of it is. And just a comment on that, through the lens of economics, businesses more often than not will be more successful even when competing against one another, when they're placed directly next to one another. In economics, this is known as Hoteling's law of spatial competition. This is why you see A&W next to McDonald's. This is why you see the Squamish Savings next to the BMO, next to the Scotiabank. This is why you see Setler next to, the Ledge. This is why you see Sushi Sen next to Samurai Sushi in Brackendale. These businesses and all the gas stations that put up right next to each other across the road. They do this because it is easier to capture markets and succeed as businesses when placed together rather than apart. And so I'm curious, and this will either be fair or unfair depending on which side of this argument you stand, why council is firmly at the 300-meter mark when economics has proven that it will limit various businesses' ability to succeed in the long run.
Thanks. And just to clarify, we're at a public hearing. Council is not firm on anything. We're here to hear the public's comments about that. Staff, do you want to speak to? Yeah. Well, we'll go ahead before you.
Well, just, I still agree with the guy from Salterra about the zoning issue. Just so if you guys are aware, there's only 3 TUPs for these dispensaries, although there may be 4 business licenses. I think one's very questionable. On the cash, tourists love cash. Okay, and we're not going into medical marijuana retail here. We're going into marijuana retail. Okay, and we're one of the few places in the corridor where openly we're selling marijuana. Tourists love marijuana, and they like cash. It avoids conflict with cards, with the machines and the cards, and they get better exchange rates on the way to the club. There's still going to be a lot of cash kicking around. With the grow ups, I think, honestly, I don't think they've been consulted properly. The existing ones, whether legal, illegal, medical, marijuana, whatever, dispensary license or growing licenses, whichever. This is a well-funded group of people, and I think we should let the dust settle with the feds before we decide to go up against these grow ups legally. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe you could speak specifically to some of the questions that come up.
I can speak just to the last question. Currently our zoning allows for production facilities, and we allow for them in most of our industrial zones. So we are taking an approach to try to, expecting that this might be, we might see an increase in the amount of employees or businesses that want to have production facilities. We're just trying to take a sensitive approach where we can still allow for them, but have some buffers and some regulations so that they don't take over all of the businesses in our industrial areas.
There was a question earlier, there was a speculation that we're kicking out grow ops from the downtown. If they're legitimately licensed and existing, can you just clarify that?
Yes, if the business has a business license and it's operating, it will be able to continue to operate until such time as it shuts down for 6 months or longer. So those businesses that are legally operating are going to be able to continue. The other question was about the 300-meter separation between dispensaries. And again, it's not something that this bylaw is proposing to do. It's something that we already have. And the reason why that was put in place was to make sure that we're still taking a precautionary approach, and we're limiting the overall density of dispensaries in Squamish. So that was the rationale, so that we wouldn't have more than 9 or 10 dispensaries altogether. And as time goes on and we learn more about this industry, once it's federally legalized, I think that we could probably revisit some of these provisions.
And just to clarify, I forgot what I was going to. Sorry.
Okay.
Kind of correct.
Yes, and a business can come in and ask for a variance.
Yes, and the businesses have in the past.
Council could approve that variance.
So currently, just to clarify, the 300-meter buffer already exists in our bylaws. We're not proposing a change necessarily. That's what currently exists.
Correct.
For retail.
For retail.
For retail. Councillor Elliott.
I just want to go back to my prior question now that Adrian's back.
Yeah, I can for sure speak to that. So the question was whether 3 bedrooms could fit in the upper story. So yeah, just doing some back of the envelope calculations for sure easily is the answer. Yeah.
Thank you. And would anyone else like to speak at this public hearing? Maybe I'll just quickly ask before I go to you a third time, Damien, is there anyone else who would like to speak this public hearing? Damien, the floor is yours.
Okay. So I'm no expert on growing marijuana at all. However, it's my understanding that some of the current production facilities are not particularly businesses, but fall under different regulations with the medical marijuana growing licenses. Have we addressed that at all?
If they're currently a growing business in the community, they have to have,
He says with the business license, and I'm not sure that, like I said, I don't understand completely, but potentially there is some sort of caveat with, however, they grow, they're not a business. They're growing other people's medical licenses. Okay? So there is a difference here between marijuana production and as a business, and marijuana production as a cooperative that grows medical marijuana for medically licensed people. And I think there needs to be some definitions to address that. Thank you.
yeah, and I suspect those are federal regulations that are clearly
Exactly.
articulating that.
They're under federal regulations, and so we're gonna wait and see what happens to those federal regulations once this new regime comes in place. But I suspect that we're not going to be attempting to enforce the bylaw against the federal regulations.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? And it's not just about cannabis, there are other issues on the agenda. Councillor Elliott?
Yeah, there's one letter in our package from someone on Bitwalker Way, and they were asking a question about why people building carriage homes who don't live in the floodplain require that new 6.7 meter height versus leaving it at the 4.58 height. And his comments were just about overlook on other neighbors and sort of preserving that. So just since that person's not here, but their question is, I thought I would ask.
Through you, Mayor, currently, regardless of whether or not you are in a flood zone, you are entitled to the 6.7 meters for a carriage house. It just is required to be on top of a garage. We're removing the requirement for a garage, which doesn't increase the allowable square footage that would be involved. It would just mean that if they could achieve the 6.7 meters without putting a garage in, which would essentially reduce the massing on the second story, it doesn't increase, the garage is exempt from the gross floor area, allowable gross floor area for a carriage home, so it doesn't necessarily change anything. It just allows a bit more diversity in terms of taller carriage houses without garages. But currently, they could achieve 6.7 meters and just build a garage underneath the carriage home.
And so we're not seeing any conflict yet with that?
I think we have heard some concerns from people, especially when, because carriage houses are allowed to go closer to the property line, so we have certainly heard some concerns. But on the other hand, we're balancing it with this need to increase the supply of rental housing. And the fastest way we can do it is through carriage homes. So as Jesse said, it won't really have an impact in places where you weren't able to build a carriage house and all of a sudden you can at that height. It just means a different form of carriage house.
Councilor, any more questions? I'll go out to public one last time. I'll ask it 3 times. Is there anyone else who would like to speak at this public hearing? I'll ask a second time. Is there anyone else who would like to make further representations at the public hearing? And I'll ask a third time. Is there any further representations at the public hearing? Staff doesn't see any more unanswered questions at this point. There being no further speakers, I will declare the public hearing closed. And just a reminder, the council members are not permitted to receive further submissions or hear either proponent or opponent to an application once the public hearing has been concluded, and any and all communication must be channeled to staff. The council may consider the third reading of the bylaws later today. Next up, we have, sorry, I just have to put my agenda. We have another timed item, development variance permit number 136, 42047 Government Road.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Daly, Development and Subdivision Coordinator with Community Planning and Infrastructure. This is a development variance permit application to vary the front yard setback. The subject property is located at 42047 Government Road, across from Brackendale Elementary School. Zoning is residential 2. A variance to the zoning bylaw 2200-2011, section 8.6 is requested to permit the construction of an attached garage workshop, a portion of which would project into the required front yard setback. DBP 136 proposes varying the front yard setback from 7.62 meters, 25 feet, to 4.11 meters, 13.48 feet. The proposed garage workshop would be part of a larger renovation to the home that would include the addition of a secondary suite and additional living space above the first story on the existing building footprint. Approximately 200 square feet of the garage workshop will project into the required front yard setback. The frontage of the property is lined with large trees and other vegetation, which provides screening from Government Road and the neighboring properties. The proponents intend to retain the existing vegetation to maintain privacy on their property. The natural screening of the property will minimize the visual impact the variance may have on neighboring properties. Staff support the variance as the proposed location of the garage workshop will utilize the existing driveway, thereby reducing the need for additional impermeable surfaces to be installed on site to access the workshop if it were located behind the existing house. Legislated and district processes for engagement were followed for this application. Notifications were mailed and hand-delivered to properties within 100 meters. No requests for a public information meeting were received. Staff recommend the development variance permit number 136 for the property located at 42047 Government Road be approved and that the mayor be authorized to execute the permit. Staff alternatively recommends that the District of Squamish not authorize the issuance of development variance permit number 136.
Thank you. Because this is has a variance on a development variance permit, of course, there's an opportunity for the public to speak to the variance. I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. I'll go to council for any questions, clarification purposes. I don't see any. Councillor Carr?
Yeah, thanks. I'm just trying to find it on the map here. Could you pull up the map, please?
The map or the site plan?
Yeah, that, no, you had it there. Oh,
Oops, sorry.
oh, map too. Is that's the high school there?
Yep, or the elementary
No,
school.
that's the Brackendale Elementary School.
Yeah,
You can tell because it looks like an
Okay.
eagle.
yeah. Oh, Brackendale. Okay, Brackendale. Yeah, because we had one on Government Road across from the high school a little while ago. I thought this was a neighboring property.
This is in Brackendale.
So this one's out in Brackendale. The one that we had across from the high school, there was concern about future road bike lanes and all that kind of stuff. Has staff reviewed this one? Can you show the one with the setback? Next one. There you go.
Yeah, there is quite a large shoulder along Government Road, and this is projecting into the required front yard setback. You can see the property line is in bolded in black there, so it's still remaining far enough away, 13.48 feet, or a sufficient distance
From
away.
the property line?
Yes, it's not projecting right up to zero lot line.
Councillor Blackenmore?
Yeah, I guess that was sort of my question, is I was wondering, like, what is the road right-of-way? Is that fully illustrated in this diagram?
Yes, it would go up to, so if you see the emboldened black line here, there's
Yeah.
the red line, which would be the required front yard setback. Yellow line is the proposed variance, and the black line at the front here is the edge of the property along the road right now.
Yes.
Do you mind going back to the aerial? I was just trying to see how it reflects the neighboring houses. Is anybody else's property out into that?
No, I believe Reese, yeah, 42035 appears to not maintain the 25-foot setback. It could have been constructed when the setbacks were different. There is a sufficient amount of vegetation screening the front of the property, and there is quite a bit of privacy along the neighboring frontages there.
Go to the public. Does anyone like to speak to this development variance permit? I don't see anyone. I don't see any further questions from council. Councillor Buckenwolf?
I'll make the comments. Sorry, I was going too fast.
We're at comments now because I don't see any more questions. I look for a motion to put something on the floor so we can comment to something. So if someone would like to move the DVP, moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Chappelle. Councillor Elliott, I'll give you first stab at this if you'd like.
Sure, I'm happy to support this variance. I think that with just the context in which it's happening, it doesn't take away from the neighborhood or just disturb the neighbors, so I don't have a problem with that.
Councillor Buckenwolf?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I can see how it's acceptable just like right in the immediate time, but I just wonder if it might be something that may not be appropriate in the future. And the reason I say that is that we know that a lot of the government road lots are of large size, so therefore they tend to involve rezonings more often than maybe some of our more established lots. And so, you know, if, for example, the trees did come down and you did have something that was a more intense use there, then you might want a sidewalk on that side, and you might want a bike lane, and you might want a whole bunch of things. And if we're sticking something in that right of way, that, you know, it might detract for it just in the same way that we turned down the one that was across from House Sandus, as Councillor Pryor was mentioning. I don't know, it just seems like, I guess, on the one hand, you know, I can see why they would prefer to have it at the front because that's where the driveway is, but on the other hand, the property is still quite large and could probably accommodate it elsewhere. But, you know, that's sort of just my general reflection on it. I don't know. I haven't really made up my mind yet.
Okay. Councillor Pryor?
No, I'm looking at the aerial and, you know, like sometimes our overlays are a little bit skewed here. I see the road right away goes right through all the parking in the school there.
It very well could be that the school parking is encroached in the right of way. That's very possible. So there's a motion on the floor if you'd like to speak to the motion specifically.
Well, I worry that it's a really busy area coming in that neck of the woods in the future. Properties to the south, it looks like all of them are encroaching, so it just makes 4 in a row instead of 3. So for that reason, you know, I don't really care. But as staff, I mean, staff don't see any long-term potential problems with bike lanes and transportation corridors and all that kind of stuff. If planning doesn't see a problem there, they're recommending it.
So the public comment period's over, sorry. Councillor Chappelle.
That's thinking about Government Road as an active transportation corridor and our future OCP plans. Does staff feel like this is compatible with that use?
Yes. So a few things were said about the other variance that we had on, I think it was on Buckley. And the difference there was the property was very close to the crosswalk over to the school, and the main active transportation route was on that side of the road, meaning the sidewalk as well as the bike lanes. So for that reason, we didn't recommend it in that case. This is a little different here.
I'm happy to support them.
Thank you. I'll speak briefly to this. I think this is an acceptable variance request. I don't think it's changed anything that anyone's going to see from Government Road. If there's consolidation of these lots in the future, then obviously whoever's doing that will take into consideration the assets that are on the land before they do that. So I think this is acceptable. Certainly, the road right-of-way is quite wide there, and any future active transportation considerations can be dealt with within our existing road right-of-way. So at this point, I think this is an acceptable aspect. It looks like there isn't room to get a road around to the backyard. The backyard is quite big, and you can certainly accommodate a garage back there, but it looks challenging and problematic to try to do that. So I think this is a reasonable variance to consider. I don't see any more hands, so I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to the next one, we have development variance permit number 135, Skyridge Dowd Drive.
Chair?
Councillor Elliott.
So I'm going to recuse myself from this discussion. A few months ago, I facilitated a meeting for this proponent, and while I don't have any ongoing financial interest, I do want to avoid any perception of bias, no matter how small. So I'm going to recuse myself.
Thank you.
Hey, Mayor Council, my name
Wait, we just have to wait for Councillor Elliott.
sorry. My name is Brian Daly, Development and Subdivision Coordinator with Community Planning and Infrastructure. This is a development variance permit application to increase the maximum allowable height of an apartment building in the CD 83 zone. The subject property is located at the end of Dow Drive, north of the Garibaldi Springs Golf Course and south of Pop Ranch Creek. Zoning is Comprehensive Development Zone 83. On May 17, 2016, District of Squamish Council adopted zoning bylaw number 2200-2011, amendment bylaw number 2381-2015, which rezoned the parcel from residential 1 to comprehensive development zone 83. On July 26, 2016, District of Squamish Council authorized development permit 416. On May 2nd, 2017, District of Squamish Council authorized development variance permit number 124, which varied the maximum height of an apartment building from 10.68 meters 12.06 meters. A variance to CD 83 zone maximum height for an apartment building approved by DVP number 124 from 12.06 meters, 39.6 feet, to 12.78 meters, 41.93 feet is requested. The variance is required to accommodate building assemblies that are larger than originally anticipated under the original variance application and to allow for the enclosure of the elevator penthouse, which will provide protection from the elements. The rooftop provides usable open space in the form of a common rooftop patio. As the elevator penthouse will provide access to a rooftop patio, its use is not limited to housing of mechanical equipment for the functioning of the elevator, and therefore is not considered a structure exempt from the height requirements under section 4.10A of the zoning bylaw. As DVP number 124 did not account for the larger building assemblies, the building will now exceed the maximum height. This variance is necessary for the applicant to obtain a building permit. Legislated and district processes for engagement were followed for this application. Notifications were mailed and hand-delivered to properties within 100 meters. No requests for a public information meeting were received. Staff recommend that development variance permit number 135 for the property located off Dowd Drive be approved and that the mayor be authorized to execute the permit. Staff alternatively recommends that the District of Squamish not authorize the issuance of development variance permit number 135.
Just so we put a fine point on it, there was a DVP that allowed for about 2 additional feet.
Yes.
About a year ago or so. And this is for an additional 1.7 feet?
Yes.
1.7 inches, I think.
Correct.
Thank you. Councillor Pryor.
Oh, yeah, I think the roof decks are...
Okay, no questions. Don't make any comments yet.
Well, no letters, I didn't actually have my hand up. So
Oh, I thought I saw a hand.
just trying to think of a question real quick.
You don't have to. I thought I saw a hand. Apologies. I will go to the public to see if there's anyone who'd like to speak to this variance request. Yeah, come on up. State your name and your address, and if you represent yourself, a business or an organization.
Mayor, Councillor Jason Wood of Vista Crescent in Squamish. I'm here to represent Downtown Development in Skyridge. First, I'd like to apologize. I know we've been back here for this variance already. I think our architects who are not here would also apologize. And say they'd like to have got the correct thing the first time. So apologize for that. The ceiling heights in the building are not changed. That's all the same. It's just the structure on top of the roof that has caused us to miss this 1.5 feet. And a little calculation on grade, 6 inches. So those are the differences. Since I'm here before you, I'll also talk to another couple of points. Certainly, I haven't heard these comments from anybody specifically, but I've heard them through other people. I just wanted to say, since the rezoning and the development permit of Skyridge, things have gone quite quickly. I think I've sat in the back listening to cannabis and other public hearings more than I've been up in the process myself. It's gone pretty well, I thought, and we've gone through the process quickly together. You've supported us completely all through the process. I appreciate Skyridge is on the mountain. It's very visible. Some of the public are sending in comments. They're not happy with how it looks. There's a pump station that's there to provide water for the school, the children that we're putting in the school. But I just wanted to say I appreciate those comments. I know they're there. Trust in the process of what we're doing at Skyridge. We've got multiple types of housing. It's never been done before in Squamish. It's hard work, and we'll get it right when it's all done. It'll be a beautiful place, and you'll see it from the highway. It'll look great.
I gave you a little latitude there, but generally we're supposed to focus on the variance, but thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
I'll ask again the public, is there anyone else who'd like to speak at this development variance permits? Questions from council? Councillor Pryor?
Yeah, could you just bring up the map again, please? Oh, no, back up. Well, I guess that one. And it's always nice when people in the community butter us up. But the proponent mentioned getting things right, and I'm sure you will. And yeah, you're right. There has been some comments on.
Can we stick to the variance, the DVP in front of us?
Well, it is. It's kind of like, I mean, the whole building and greening things up potentially to, so visually from the freeway. And I expect greening.
Do you have a question? We're not at comments period.
Well, I'll wait for comments then.
Thank you. Any more questions from council? Seeing none, I'm happy to put forward this variance, which I've seconded by Councillor Chappelle. I'll speak quickly to it. It's a minor variance. It's I think, looking back, probably would have supported the variance had it been part of the original variance. So happy to, and it's only a very, very small portion of the building. So happy to support this variance. Councillor Pryor?
Yeah, thanks. I'm only bringing this up because the proponent himself brought it up about the getting it right part, and the pump station was mentioned, and I'm hoping that when he says that, he brings that pump station into bringing it right part, and maybe can green that up a little bit too as well.
Any other council members want to comment on this? Don't see any. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? If any, motion carries. Can someone get Councilor Oates, please? Thank you. Why don't we take a 3-minute recess?
2.5.
We are on 8A1, District of Squamish Housing Agreement by Railtown 39660 Government Road.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Jessie Fletcher, planning with the Community Planning Infrastructure Department. Tonight I'll be presenting a bylaw for a housing agreement for 39660 Government Road. The subject property is located in the North Yards neighborhood at 39660 Government Road in the mixed-use District 1 Mud 1 zone. The highlighted area shows the location. Development permit has been received for the site for a mixed-use building containing 27 residential units. An application that will be presented to council for consideration on July 24th, 2018. So that's next week. The Mud 1 zone only requires that 30% of residential units be secured as rental to achieve the density bonus, but this housing agreement secures 100% of the residential units as purpose-built rental in perpetuity. The applicant did this to enter the priority application stream, which expedited their development permit application. The housing agreement that is proposed secures 27 units as purpose-built rental in perpetuity. Adoption and registration of the housing agreement as a Section 219 covenant on title are recommended conditions of the development permit adoption, which you'll see next week. Staff recommend that the District of Squamish give first 3 readings to the District of Squamish Housing Agreement Bylaw number 2619, 2018.
Thank you. Any questions with regard to this housing agreement bylaw? Guys keep saying that we're actually doing one of these. Councillor Bryan.
I'll move the staff's recommendation.
Is there a second or seconded by Councillor Chappelle? I don't see any hands. I'll call the question. You want to speak to it, Councillor?
Well, I was just going to say that, I mean, we really, I watched this go through the ADP and staff talked about it, and this is all the planning and all that going into some purpose-built rentals and they get her built.
Councillor Elliott, did I see your hand?
I just had a question about, is there a covenant on this at all as far as noise goes?
Is a Section 219?
Through your mayor, when the development permit does come forward next week, one of the recommended conditions of adoption is a noise and vibration covenant for rail. But currently there is no noise covenant on title.
As part of this agreement.
As part of this agreement.
Councillor Blackman, just to bring you up to date, the motion on the floor is to support housing agreement bylaw. Seeing no more hands, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Next up, council can consider District of Squamish zoning bylaw, all of the ones that were part of the public hearing. But the first one on deck is the 2018 miscellaneous amendments. Would anyone like to move it? I don't see any movers. I'll make a comment. And, I'm still not 100% in agreement of whether or not we've gotten these carriage house secondary suite bylaws quite right. I think there's debate about out there. There's letters that both sort of try to encourage us to make them bigger, and some that try to encourage to make them smaller, to make them less high. That have said we should do more public engagement on this. So I'm not 100% sure if we're there yet on that, and it's more of a question in my mind of just articulating it loud. I saw a hand go up, but I didn't see who put it up. Councillor Elliott and Councillor Carter and Councillor Scott.
So I was going to move it.
Okay.
Just so we had something to talk about.
Sure. Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Pryor. Go ahead.
So my comments are similar. But I think that because we're doing annual updates, I think we just have to be really cautious and monitor secondary suites and carriage homes as they're built, because I want them to be a tool for increasing density in some of our single-family home neighborhoods. What I'm a little bit nervous about is that we're going to create neighborhood conflict with some of the siting and not having regulations about sort of overlook and what happens to preserve privacy because they are set back quite far on the property line. So, but I do think we have to put something in place and then work with it and adjust it as we go along. So I am going to support this at this time, but I do think it's something that future council will need to keep their eye on, and it should be part of each amendment each year is to revisit this and look at whether we're creating what we want to create in terms of additional housing on lots.
That was exactly what I was going to say.
Councillor Scott.
Yeah, I would agree that it's a step in the right direction. I don't mind carriage home. I think that, our carriage home regulations before were not so bad. We've done a lot of, staff's done an amazing job at bringing back the micro amendments and, looking at these amendments now, I can totally support them. The idea of privacy when you're densifying, when you want mass density in areas. What concerns me more is the DCC regulations. We still don't charge DCCs. That's ridiculous. There's 300 homes in the Airbnb. So there needs to be policy, and I'm not sure where it would go in it's not the zoning bylaw.
It's not the zoning bylaw.
Yeah.
We can bring
Hang on,
the DC side. It's off topic though, Councillor Scott.
I know, I was just going to say that. I was just going to say, it's not in the zoning bylaw. So I'm going to leave that alone, but I need to see that come back. I need to see we were supposed to have how many Airbnbs were being used and how much the DCC reduction actually
Speaking of bylaw, we can bring this up after the fact.
Encouraged
Speak to the bylaw, please.
encouraged the building of laneway houses. So I don't know how much these new regulations are going to affect or not affect how many laneway homes are built, if it's going to make it easier for people to build, and then we're out of DCCs. So I'd like to see that come back for change. And the other thing is the pot policy.
That's not on the floor yet.
Is this not
in the miscellaneous amendments?
In the miscellaneous amendments
That's
for
motion
cannabis?
on the floor. In the miscellaneous, the first bylaw.
Yeah, it is.
No,
Cannabis.
3 and 4.
We're just doing number 1.
We have to do bylaws separately.
We're just,
So we're
okay,
only
we're just
on
doing
miscellaneous
miscellaneous
amendments.
Okay, yeah, so that's, okay.
Any more on bylaw amendment 2607, miscellaneous amendments? I'll just quickly, I think Councillor Elliott articulated very clearly my concerns, and so I think it's a good idea to make sure we're revisiting this, to make sure it's meeting our objectives. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Councillor Schwell, I will go back to you. Just to speak specifically, I agree, I think we do need to bring the DCC bylaw back, but I meant to cut you off just because I need you to be on topic.
It's being cut off, it's all good.
Yeah, you're okay, you don't want to say anything more to it? Okay.
No, I do, well, if you're giving me the opportunity, we were supposed to get that back in our first year. So our DCCs, when we relieved ourselves of DCCs on laneway homes, we were supposed to get an update after a year of how that had affected the building of rental, occupancy for rental, and building laneway homes, and we never received an update. So it's a little late in the term now. I don't know why that never came back, but it'd be great to see how many laneway houses were built without DCCs, and how many of those have gone into Airbnb stock.
So I'll ask staff to respond because it did come back, and we actually made an amendment to the bylaw because it did come back.
But not concerned with Airbnb or rentals.
No.
Ms. Arthurs.
Right, so related to the secondary suites issue or the carriage homes, there was an incentive for building, encourage people to build. And what happened is we gave a 1-year exemption. We were told by the inspector of municipalities, it's either in or out. You can't give a temporary exemption. So they were actually removed. It came back after that year, and council removed them from the DCCs altogether.
So, Mr. Buxton?
And we did report back after a year. We are delinquent in a subsequent report, but we did report back after a year.
Yeah, but my point is that most of these houses have not become rental stock, and the intention of the removal of the DCCs were to increase our rental stock, and it has not. It's actually just increased private business. So that needs to be addressed.
My understanding that's coming back fairly soon to council. I just don't know the scheduling.
It is coming back to council. We started that project up. We're going to start the engagement this summer, and with the plan to come back to council early in the fall.
Thank you. Councillor Carr.
No, that's, I just remembered what Jonas said. I mean,
We've said it 5 times in the last 3 months, so. Okay, next up we have amendment bylaw number 2610-2018, electric vehicle charging receptacles. Would someone like to move this? Moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Chappelle. Councillor Carr, do you want to speak to this?
I'm happy with this. You know, I'm hoping that, you know, I don't know how much electricity we have coming into the community, but I'm sure it's just something to be cognizant of when we start getting a couple thousand or more of these in downtown. We got to make sure the wires are in there, but I'm pretty sure that's not going to be an issue.
Thanks. Yeah, I have equal concern about the amount of electricity, and I think the uptake of electric vehicles, unfortunately, is going to be a lot slower, but it will be amazing in the long term to have this infrastructure in place for the future. So I think we're just sort of matching other communities now, so it's a good policy to implement.
Any other comments? I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Third up is amending bylaw number 2611, cannabis retail. Councillor Elliott?
I'll move the recommendation and speak to it.
Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Pryor. Councillor Elliott.
So I've always been really proud of our community for being one of the first to begin to regulate cannabis retail before we knew that the date of legalization. I think it was progressive and the right thing to do. I also think that our zoning bylaw is something that evolves each year, and while there is a lot of support for cannabis retail, I also know there's a lot of nervousness in the community as well about how and what this will look like. So it's not something that everyone is comfortable with yet, but I think they will get there. So I think the use of buffers is a wise thing to do in the short term. Could that change in the future? I think that very much is a possibility as people get used to seeing these types of retail forms in the same way that they see liquor stores. But change sometimes takes a little bit of time, and I'm okay with passing the regulations as they stand today to give our community an opportunity to adjust, and then next council can revisit this next year based on community feedback. And I like the fact that retailers can come for a DVP and make a case for being somewhere within the 300-meter buffer that makes sense. And then the community gets to speak to it. And if we're not hearing a lot of pushback from the community as DVPs come forward, I think that's a signal to future council that they can start to loosen the regulations. But I do think we need to give the community some time to absorb this change. It is a big social and cultural change for many people, but I'm happy to support what staff has put in front of us today.
Councillor Schwab.
Thanks, I'd agree with a lot of those comments. The things that I'm concerned about are monopolies. When you tend to put restrictions on private business, it tends to create monopolies in the community, and you end up getting one retailer that can go in a space and then ends up monopolizing businesses. So the buffer is the only concern I have, but I think this is a massive step forward. I'm happy that we've actually had a really good look at other communities and what they're implementing, and because people can come back for an amendment to the buffer, I'm totally happy to support this, and I think we've done a really amazing job of amalgamating a lot of people's policy into something that's specific to our community. And the reason the buffer bothers me is because our community is that a buffer works in a lot of communities, but because of the fact that we don't have a lot of economic development space, it's a fairly restrictive policy, especially in the I-9 zone. I would agree with the man that spoke from Solterra about the I-9 zone today, but I'm happy to move this forward and see how it goes.
Yeah, thanks. I'm also proud of our town to be first out of the gate in a lot of this, and thinking of the history of it and being on the council last term when we kind of bumped this forward. Well, it was kind of funny because we weren't going to support marijuana sales. And then Councillor Wace went away on holidays and we supported it when he came back. What the hell? Anyway, it was really kind of funny. But I like the fact that there is variances in there, and I like the fact that it's a little bit restrictive, or a lot restrictive to what some of the people in the audience said, but I'm expecting to see variances coming because we might not have got it right with this 300 meters, and we can change it, so I support it.
Yeah, I'll speak to it briefly. I think the interesting thing, based on some of the comments that I heard during the public hearing, is that as Councillor Elliott and Aaron Chappelle have said, we've been very progressive on this issue and out front of this compared to most communities. Every other jurisdiction in the SORD has essentially said no to any of it. Most communities out there are saying no to sales, no to production. You have to come and get a spot zoning for all those uses. So we're actually taking quite a progressive, and I think the one that's sort of recommended to put some regulation there, but be open to alternatives to the various process. So if it was up to me personally, I'd probably say the buffers are too much. But I do agree that we have to be sensitive to the fact that not everyone agrees with that, and there may be a time period of adjustment, of education, of that type of thing. So I'm happy to support this step. Businesses can come and ask for variance, either the school buffer and or the buffer to an existing business, and then we can deal with those in one-offs. This is an iterative process. This is, as Parliamentary Secretary Claire said last week, this is not an event. This isn't the end, this is the beginning of the process. In a year from now, likely the micro-production, which would be, I think, and its associated retail, I think would be an appropriate use in I-9, even I-8. That's going to be coming down the pipe in about a year from now. The approach that the federal government's taking is, let's start off quite regulatory, see how things go, and then lessen up the regulations as we learn more about how this implementation is going to go. And I think that's a bit of the approach that we're taking. We're actually very progressive compared to other communities, but we're going to have a few stopgaps in there so we can do a pulse on this. It's easier to pull back those regulations once we get a better sense of it, once the community has a better sense of it, than it is to not have those regulations in there now and have to come on with that. So I think this is a fairly reasoned yet progressive approach that we're taking, and it's not the end of where these regulations will likely end up. It's just the beginning. Anyone else want to speak to it? Let's see any more speakers. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carries. Amending bylaw number 2618, cannabis production. Would anyone like to move it? Moved by Councillor Pryor, seconded by Councillor Blackman-Wolf. Councillor Pryor?
You said it all.
Okay. Councillor Elliott?
So I've been thinking hard about this one ever since we started talking about it, and I'm actually not going to support this bylaw amendment. I still have some concerns about how this is all going to play out in terms of retail production, medical production, and then coming next year, sort of that craft production or micro production. And I'd actually prefer if we required spot zoning, and for that. I think it's because I want for council to have discretion over location in the business park, and I want to have council's oversight in terms of looking at the building in terms of noise, smell, and light. I think this is an industry that can coexist actually quite well with other industries, but I think we have to get it right. So I wish this bylaw was coming next year instead of this year for me. So I won't support it this time, although I think once all that next level of regulations rolls out from the federal government, I think we'd be better placed. So,
Councillor Blackman-Wolf?
I'll support this amendment. Like I said in the committee meetings, I think we could have gone a little bit further than this, but happy to see that we're not prohibiting this. So I think it's a good compromise for now, and I'm looking forward to next year when the legal rollout full force, and really hoping that we keep this on our radar so that we can get a craft cannabis production framework in place very, very quickly. Because I think that's going to be the type of use that is going to be conducive to good neighbors, but also a very good economic development opportunity for our community. In contrast to perhaps some of the more large industrial style scale operations. So yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, I would agree with Councillor Blackman-Wolf's comments, but one thing I want to add is that it seems like it's a far way away with the edibles. There's still a lot of work to do in the bylaws, and as Mayor Heinzman has said, it's a long road before it's actually fully legalized, and I think the restrictions are actually going to cut our industry in Squamish in half. And as one of the major employers in Squamish, it's going to be really interesting to see what happens with the rollout of the new pot legalization, because it's right now, it restricts edibles, and actually the medical component of medical marijuana, which is a CBD oil, is restricted, but the psychoactive ingredient is the not restricted part. So it's going to be pretty interesting seeing what happens in the future with CBD oils and edibles and smokables, and how that affects our economic development. I think a lot of these bylaws, I'd like to see them referred to economic development as well. You know, the bylaws are part of our economic development strategies, and referring some of these bylaws for comment by our economic development officer, and maybe that is a part of it, but when planning and getting into the silos, it's easy to miss economic development factors.
Carrie, do you want to speak to that specifically? Because I know there has
I
been-
just want to add one thing, is that this is a new form, a new type of use, and so there isn't a lot of research to say that these are, to speak to how great economic this is, how many employees it employs. So I think within a year we should have a little bit more information to better, address and change that regulation to address those things. So we do actually refer out to economic development with all of our reports before bringing it to council. So, but I don't believe that they at this time have enough research to provide any further comment around that.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Kat.
Yeah, and I'll just briefly say, I think this is a proactive measure, one that other communities aren't taking, but it's also measured. So I think I like the approach, but I think it is going to be something that we are constantly vigilant of, constantly learning from, and it'll evolve tremendously in the next year, particularly as micro aircraft uses and production is allowed. The interesting aspect that Councillor Chappelle brought up about various things that are going to be regulated and not allowed are challenging, particularly the topicals, particularly things that the seniors have a particular interest in, which is ironic because they aren't the mind-altering stuff. What MP Blair said was it really where they're trying to grapple with are the things that children can be perceived to be attracted to, like edibles. I said, well, what are you doing about caffeine drinks and that type of thing? So he didn't seem to have an answer. But anyway, that's where the federal government is really struggling, is how do their issues is how do you protect youth and children from, I said, well, what do you do about lemonade vodka drinks? It's a big question, and it'll be interesting to see how society starts to look at these and comparing them to alcohol or caffeine or some other legal drugs out there, and how society starts reacting to cannabis products in the same way. That's a whole other conversation. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Oh, I'm sorry, Councillor Elliott is opposed. Pardon me. Motion carries. Next up, staff reports, community planning and infrastructure, sanitary sewer repair tender award. Reminder, council, this is a tender award discussion about the actual projects that went out to tender has already happened, although I suspect some conversation maybe want to be had around the active transportation priorities. So welcome.
Sure. Thank you very much. My name is Jesse Mord. I'm the Capital Projects Manager. So tonight we're looking for council approval to proceed with 4 project contract tenders. I'm going to present the first 3, and then Devin Kianaga is going to present the 4th, which is the Buckley lift station. So for the first one, we're starting with 2008 sanitary sewer repairs. We're looking for the following resolutions. First resolution is a District of Squamish award a contract to Superior City Contracting Services for the repairs. And that second, that the Mayor and Corporate Officer are authorized to execute this agreement. Just a quick background on this work. It's every year we do investigate and do repair deficiencies to our sanitary system. This allows for the efficient operation and longevity of our infrastructure, and also delays deferring capacity upgrades to our sanitary system. Our plan follows the sanitary master plan and the liquid waste management plan. So a quick project description is we're doing 38 locations around Squamish. Most of these are trenchless repairs, meaning that they're very innocuous. There's no open cuts. Mostly the public, residents and businesses won't see much of the work. And so it's very kind of low impact. We went out to BC Bid for this work as per our purchasing policy, and we received 2 bidders on the work. The first was Superior City Contracting Services. Their price was $402,000, 640 cents, or sorry, $100,640. The second bidder was about $100,000 more than this. We use a standardized contracting system called MMCD. This means it's a unit price contracts. Many of the municipalities within BC use this system. So although we're awarding for $400,000, it's the end price can vary a little bit based on quantities that are used, for example, or unknown circumstances that we find in the ground. We have a communication plan that's ready to go out. Again, we'll certainly make sure all the public is notified, but it's very a low impact set of projects. This brings me back to our resolutions where I'm looking for the award to Superior City Contracting Services.
Any questions? Councillor Clark?
Yeah, thanks. I'm just wondering, when the province is so busy, or when our area is so busy, and I know you BC Bid, I mean, is there anything policy-wise about going Alberta Bid too? Like we're getting 1, sometimes 2 people bidding on all our projects. Can you talk about that?
Going to diversify the bidding process.
Maybe it's Christine's the best for that.
Thank you. My understanding is that BC Bid is open to across Canada, so that's one of the reasons we use it. The province it's the same vehicle that the province uses to make sure that they meet all their treaty requirements.
Do you figure it hits enough people? I mean, it targets enough people?
They're
all 6 or 8 players in Squamish so busy they're not bidding anymore?
Yeah.
Yep. Through the mayor, that's exactly what we're seeing and what we're hearing from other developers in town and from other municipalities, that they're getting no bids, they're getting 1 bid. It's just been a very difficult year for that. We do get bids from outside the province. In fact, we had a bid from Quebec on the asset management for pavement this year. So people do pick it up, but of course, it takes a lot to get here.
Thanks. Any more questions? Looking for someone if they'd like to move the tender award to Superior City Contracting, and then Mayor and Corporate Officer will be voice next week. Moved by Councillor Elliott, second by Councillor Bell. Call the question. All those in favour? Opposed? Motion carries. 2018 Annual Water Main Replacement Project tender award.
Great, thank you. This is a tender award as well. We're looking for the following resolutions. The District of Squamish award a tender for this work to Capilano Highway Services, and that the Mayor and Corporate Officer will be authorized to execute this agreement. Once again, this is an annual program that we undertake. It's about maintaining and upgrading all our infrastructure to make sure we meet the needs of the community. There's kind of 3 types of projects. There's old pipe that we need to replace, there's fire flow issues that we need to improve, and we also need to make upgrades for the changing needs of the community. All these projects are selected and prioritized based on the water capital plan. For this contract, there's 4 projects. I have talked about these projects before, but briefly, Skyline, at the bottom of Skyline, there's some water line we need to replace. Arga Crescent in the Highlands to Skyline Drive, Garibaldi Crescent in the Estates, and then Clark Road, just north of the Industrial Park. Once again, we followed the purchasing policy and went to BC Bid. And once again, we received 2 bidders for this work. Capilano Highway Services was the lowest at $520,825. And the next bidder was about $500,000 above that. Once again, this is a unit price contract, so our final prices can vary by a little bit. We do have a communication plan that's ready to go out pending council approval. There'll be a little bit more impact to some residents as we are affecting the water. We'll have door-to-door service. We'll be talking to all the residents and making sure that we minimize the impact to them.
Thank you. Questions from council? Councillor Elliott.
Mr. Ward, I noticed that our annual budget is 1.1 million, and we now have a bid for basically half that amount. And so, is it possible to do more this year, or what's our plan?
Yeah, great question. Through the mayor, that was a kind of a placeholder. I meant to kind of scale that down. We have a lot of different components to the water program. So right now, this is one component that we're awarding right now. We will be coming back to council for other projects to award.
Thank you. Any further questions from council? I don't see any. Would someone like to move the tender award? Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Active transportation and transit projects tender award.
Sure, thank you. I just need a minute
I suspect there should be a little more discussion about the actual project. Just the one.
Thanks. Just 1 minute, please. If I can get a presentation on the screen.
You just have to,
please still be patient.
a little while you're right there. Phew! Patience is a virtue.
Thank you. So I'm presenting the Active Transportation and Transit Project Awards. We also have Dora Gunn right here. Dora has been and is very instrumental in the transit and active transportation program. Is it slow again? So we have three resolutions tonight that we're looking for. First of all, that the District of Squamish award the active transportation tender and transit projects to Alpine Paving. Secondly, we're looking to that the District of Squamish negotiate with Alpine Paving to increase the scope of their work to include the additional projects that we're going to propose tonight. And thirdly, that the Mayor and Corporate Officer be authorized to execute this agreement.
Can I just point out that we've made a late change to our recommendation. We'd like to propose, said to include 3 additional projects, and it's a negotiation. We're not sure if we can really get 3, so we realized sort of at the last moment that we should just say additional projects. And we'll talk about which additional projects we'd like to attempt to negotiate.
So the specifics of this tender award, there's 4 locations on the list. Briefly, Portree Pathway, which is effectively a 2.4 meter pathway from Garibaldi Highlands Elementary to Perth. Currently there's no shoulder, no sidewalk, so this is going to provide students and the public alike access from the school to Perth. The second is widening under the Mount Combine Channel underneath Highway 99. Currently there is a trail there, but we're widening it to a 3 meter standard, which is the corridor trail standard. The third project is a sidewalk that on Government Road from Malcolm Elementary to the existing sidewalk right near Garibaldi Way sidewalk. Currently there's a shoulder but no sidewalk. This is to help students and the public traverse this area. Fourthly, Howe Sound Secondary bus pullout and trail connection. So this would go at the north side of Howe Sound Secondary. So once again, we went to BC Bid, and this time we only received 1 bidder. So it's a sole bidder, and that's Alpine Paving. Their bid was $261,443. Once again, this is a unit price contract, and so the final price can vary a little bit depending on what we find when we do the work. We have a communication plan that, pending council approval, we're ready to implement. So we have a surplus in the active transportation budget, and I'll talk about why we have a surplus in a second, but I want to kind of demonstrate what we have as our financial overview before I get into kind of how we want to spend this money. So there's kind of 3 budgets that we have that contribute to how much money we can spend, and this is our transit budget, about $90,000, our active transportation budget itself, and then ICBC also contributes basically safety funding on the specific projects that we're building at any given year. As far as expenditures, we have a list. The first is a Logger Lane lighting project. So this is the corridor lighting project. A quick update on that is we're basically at substantial completion. We have a final walkthrough within a week for that one, so hopefully we'll wrap that one up really quick.
And just to clarify, that's a carry forward from last year, so it's not out of this year's budget, correct? It's last year's carry forward. Thank you.
Sorry, just to clarify, it was, there's carry forward from last year and some of this year's. We had to bridge the years because that project ended up being more expensive for Loggers Lane project. So it will be partially into this year's budget as well. The second component.
So just to clarify then, 225 is from this year's budget on that? Or is that the entire budget?
It's entire, I'm not sure, it's entire contribution this year. I'm not sure which way it's from.
The active, the way it looks in the numbers here, the active transportation budget had 700,000 from this year plus 200,000 carried forward, which equals the 900,000. So the 225, no, it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's right.
Is that right? Yeah. And then the 225 is the total of the 2 years.
So 225 is the total over 2 years,
Yes.
so a portion of it's from last year.
Yep, from the carry
50%,
forward. That's
and
right.
a portion of it's from this year's budget.
The second component is we're looking at, we're planning on securing right-of-way and building a multi-use path from Pemberton Avenue to Hunter Place. Currently, if someone's on Pemberton Avenue and they want to get to Cleveland Ave or Nesters or wherever it may be, they have to either go to Loggers Lane, it's quite circuitous, or some people are using the highway shoulder to do this. So our intention is to secure right-of-way and build a path to kind of make it a very direct route from Pemberton Ave and to the commercial or to the school, wherever they may go. So we, as far as an update, we just received an appraisal tonight. So we're kind of on the early stages of moving this project forward. The third one there, the Queensway cycle lane changes. Currently, there's been some interest in changing the cycle lanes on Queensway. Effectively, it goes, there's a travel lane, a cycle lane, and a parking lane. We're looking at switching the parking lane and the cycle lane, so the cycle lane would be on the inside against the curb. The benefit of this is it gets the cyclists further away from the cars that travel on the road, as well as the parking people don't have to cross, the cars don't have to cross the cycle lane. So it's overall safety. We're planning on implementing this next week. So it's a test trial. We're going to see how it goes, see what the feedback is, and if we're successful, we can put it on the other side of Queensway and potentially elsewhere in the community. We also have a budget set aside to do some designs and studies. So some of some designs for our active transportation plan next year, as well as the feasibility study for a separated bike path on Government Road is part of that $65,000. We've retained ISL Engineering, who are doing a lot of the design work for us for the project we're doing this year, as well as some contract administration in our construction projects this year. And lastly, it's the Alpine Paving tender award, which I mentioned earlier. So the difference between those numbers is close to $200,000. The reason that we have $200,000 is twofold. First of all, it's as Chris mentioned, it's a very difficult year to kind of be forecasting what kind of prices we're going to get. So we had a large contingency in our budget prices. Thankfully, Alpine Paving provided a competitive price, and so we saved a bit of money there. Second of all, we thought we were going to have to purchase property for one of our projects or purchase a right-of-way, and it turns out that we don't need to use the active transportation budget to secure that right-of-way. So there's lots of needs and wants in the active transportation program, so we certainly want to spend the money this year. Before I get into what we're recommending, I want to talk about what's not in the list this year. So there's two on the left, the Diamond Head Road and Pemberton Ave connections. So these, in March, we approached council and we provided a list of projects, and these were on the list. And what we're proposing right now is to postpone these projects. So first of all, the Diamond Head Road bus pullout and sidewalk. Effectively, it would be a pullout and a sidewalk right near the joinery, right near Mapquam Road. The reason we want to delay it until next year is that we were going to pave Diamond Head Road this year. At the same time, we were going to pave the bus pullout. There's economies of scale and minimal, only one disruption to the residents. It turns out there's been a few water line breaks in that the water line in Diamond Head Road, so we want to replace the water line next year. We'll then repave and do the pull-out at the same time. So it just makes operation construction sense to postpone it for a year. The second is the Pemberton Ave connection to Highway 99. So what this is a ramp effectively from the end of Pemberton Ave up to the highway. We did a detailed design for this, and it turned out it was much more expensive than originally forecast. It was $62,000 to build the ramp to the highway. When we saw the price, we really kind of dug into the functionality of the ramp. So kind of walking you through it, some of the users that are currently going up to the highway right there are going to Cleveland, so they're going north along the highway. As I mentioned, we're actually looking to build that connection from Pemberton Ave to Hunter Place. So effectively, you're not going to need to go on the highway or need to go to Loggers to get to Nesters or to the school. So effectively what it does is it reduces the number of users right now that are only going south, where there's currently two businesses. We also looked at the shoulder on Highway 99. And the shoulder is really limited. It's really quite narrow, and in fact, at the south end of Macbam Blind Channel Bridge, there's a pinch point that's only a few feet wide. It's a structural pinch point, meaning that in order to upgrade it, there's changes to the bridge abutments, and it's quite significant and certainly outside of our budget possibilities to do. So it was problematic to be building a path to a highway that doesn't have a lot of users, and it's not going to be accessible for a lot of people. So maybe if there's questions, I can hold on. What we want to do is we want to propose three other locations. The first is Hilltop House bus pads. So these actually were in our March proposal. We didn't think we were going to have the budget to do it. Now we know we have the budget to do it, so we want to get that back on the list. The second and third, Macbam Elementary Refuge and Buckley Ave separated bus paths, because I have some designs up to show you. Starting with the Macbam School Refuge, so effectively, where that is right at Macbam Elementary at the south entrance there, right between Viking Ridge and the entrance. Currently, there's a pathway at the bottom of the photo that dumps pedestrians and active transportation users kind of to this no man's land. It's just a widened shoulder where cars from Viking Ridge and vehicles from going into the school kind of intersect, if you will. It's been on the district's radar for a while. It's been on the school district's radar for a while. And what this bulb out will do was basically push cars kind of on make them slow down, make them have to go around a physical barrier. It's also going to give pedestrians and active transportation users a bit more physical protection, and certainly is a continuation of the sidewalk. This was on our plan. It didn't make it this year. I think it was the one down from a priority in this year, but it certainly is on our radar, something we want to do. The second is something you might not be aware of. It's a Buckley Ave separated pathway. So this would be a 3-meter separated pathway going from Cole Elementary up to the north end of Housetown Secondary. It'd be paved. And effectively it would connect the new Jumar frontage. The crosswalk at the bottom of the picture there goes across the railway tracks to Bailey Street. We are looking at upgrading with a grant next year that railway crossing. It's also going to connect to the Buckley bus pullout and trail connection I mentioned that we're doing this year. So, effectively this would be a 3-meter pathway all the way from Bailey or Cleveland to Carson Place when it's complete. So the question I guess is why now? Why are we proposing these projects? Why are we looking at not doing some of our other projects that we said we'd do? And it's twofold. First of all, we really believe in these projects. We believe in them because there are huge safety components to them. I'm not sure if anybody's aware, but certainly during the lunch hour, there's just a ton of kids.
We're all aware, Jess.
So there's obviously safety components to it. There's also a lot of people use them, so they're well used. So certainly compared to maybe the ramp at Highway 99, these are much heavier used areas. Second of all, we approached the school district because for the bus, the Buckley bus pullout, as well as the Buckley lift station, which Devon's going to introduce in a few minutes, we actually encroached into school district property. And in order to encroach, we had to get their permission for a right-of-way effectively for those projects. The school district was excellent to work with and very gracious, and they said they would give us the right-of-way. They also asked us, if possible, if we could make safety and trail connection improvements in these areas. So we're trying to be nimble and quick and change our, change priorities and seize the day, and so we are. And so, yeah, so those are the reasons why we're proposing.
I would also just add that we've been talking about this trail with council and the district for some time now, and I think everybody had always assumed that it was a trail for the kids. And we kind of threw it out there, wouldn't this be nice if we could actually make this a full paved trail and it give public access? And they said, absolutely, public access, that's great. So they offered up a great asset for the community to get people, everybody, not just the kids, off of Buckley.
Yeah, thank you. This would be District of Squamish right away, so public access. I do have more, but if there's questions of this.
Yeah, I've got a few speakers. I do want to say that, this came up in our right about 2 years ago now. So council's well aware of this, and I'm personally really pleased to see both of these on the radar, but particularly that Buckley separated pathway, I think, is a great asset. And the other thing is we're starting to really see the Safe Routes to School HASTE programming being implemented in a number of different levels within this strategy as well. So awesome. I have Councillor Pryor, then Councillor Chappell.
Yeah, thanks. I'm just wondering about that big development just around the corner from this. And just wondering why this isn't part of their transportation requirements.
Through the mayor, sorry, is that Jumar or the north side?
Yeah.
I'm not sure anyone sitting at the table is ready. I don't know, Chris, do you want to tap it, or Gary?
Sure. Through the chair, it's not a frontage improvement that you can apply to a development permit or a building permit. It's just not possible.
And just to add to that, we that's what we couldn't do. What we could do is considerable frontage improvements for private transportation, including multi-use pathways and connections to trails on the other side of the Discovery Trail, and so this continues on, seamlessly continues on that planned network.
I'm glad to see this one on here too.
Councillor Chappell.
Thanks. So is this going to be a multi-use path? Excellent. This is a fantastic solution away from the ditch too, so congratulations. Huge. And the parking, moving the parking on
We haven't negotiated this one yet, so.
Yeah, moving the parking to the outside on Queensway is going to be an epic change. That is a horrifying area to ride for exactly the reasons that you said. So, and I love how you called it a pilot project.
That's another council.
You know you've grown up.
Council, we want to see a bit of a pilot project approach to help to move these ideas forward in the community, so that's moving back as well. Councillor Kent.
And just to be clear, so these are proposed in order, you're trying to get them to accommodate some of these projects, or certainly probably not all of them. Is that the case?
So, great segue. Through the mayor, we'll get into that next slide if we can hold on. Yeah.
Just a sort of another segue there, that this Man from School piece, and to Patty's point about the HASTE BC piece, and seeing as Project 3 that you're working on is that extended sidewalk all the way through. Really happy to see this tie that up, because I've driven by there and seen mothers with strollers and kids on bikes and stuff kind of stranded right in that zone. So.
No, there's some really good safety priority issues on this list. So awesome. Why don't we continue on?
So thank you. Just a few more slides. So what we're proposing is to make a contract change to the Alpine paving tender award, assuming it gets passed tonight. The catch with this is it would basically be a direct award, a sole sourcing one company. That is outside our purchasing policy, and that's why part of the reason we're here speaking with you to get council to consider and approve it. the pros of doing a direct award to Alpine is it certainly expedites the process because we can award a contract potentially tomorrow. We don't have to go through the very kind of lengthy process we normally do for contracts. It's also, they're going to be mobilized. Two of these sites are very close to existing sites, so it'll be very efficient for the contractor to kind of keep going. I mean, certainly for district staff, it's only one contract to manage. We potentially don't have two contractors. We have to somehow juggle in the same area as well. Thirdly, with a contract change, it's a negotiated change. So we would approach Alpine Paving and say, this is what we want to do, what kind of prices are you asking for? So we could actually negotiate the price. If we went to BC tender, BC bid for a new tender, whatever prices we get, we get. The challenge right now is that we only got one bidder in our last tender. It's a very busy market out there. So there's no sure thing, or we're not necessarily going to get a better price if we go to BC bid. This is bringing me back to resolutions. We want to award the tender to Alpine Paving. We want District Squamish to negotiate with Alpine Paving to increase the scope based on the projects we talked about, and that Mayor and Corporate Officer be authorized to execute this agreement.
Thanks. I think it's a great list. I was a little worried about taking that one understanding up to the highway ramp off, but I think the alternative route is being suggested, and that was definitely the number one that came out of the HSBC walkabouts and everything. So I think that's helpful. That wasn't going through, I'd be concerned, but I think it's a good direction to prioritize that one. The actual trail route, I think that's great. I just have a quick question for Christine. Any kind of right-of-way, we wouldn't necessarily have to use that transportation budget. We could use real estate reserves, that type of thing. And so reserves, I should say.
If they are budgeted, yes.
If they're budgeted, but it not necessarily has to be this particular money source to purchase right-of-way for active transportation. I just want to make sure our staff understand that.
Yes, in the past we have from time to time used the land sale reserve for that type of thing. The only caveat I would put on that is generally rights of way are not considered capital under accounting rules. So it's a little bit of a disconnect sometimes.
Thank you. Councillor Chappell.
I'll move the recommendation.
Moved, seconded by Councillor Kent. Councillor Chappell, want to have a few words?
I think I've already said everything, that I'm just excited that we have an active transportation budget, and that I look in the future to actually increase that budget to get more projects off the table and not have to scramble for money and relocate money from last year's budget. I think that you guys are really doing a good job of marrying the need for underground infrastructure with above ground projects as well, so congratulations.
Okay.
Yeah, and to that point, I can appreciate your idea of consolidating the Diamond Head Road, water main and paving. It's going to be a good thing because that road is in horrendous shape. There's some little spots in there where it's collapsing. It's like riding a popboard going down. And that's finished.
I think the list is really exciting. I feel like there's real headway being made on the safe routes to school and some of the critical things that we've been talking about for a couple of years. I do think we can probably maximize active transportation grants out there more. There's some that we're just not tapping into, and I'd like to see us leverage our monies more so as we look at next year's projects, let's really proactively make sure we're set up for funding opportunities, not just from our coffers, but from other funding sources particularly on this type of thing. They're out there, so I'd like to see half of our budget. I should say, I'd like to see our budget doubles, but that money coming from other funding sources in the future. That's what I can look.
Yeah, and I noticed that, I know that there's increased interest in what the province terms rural communities, and I think we'd probably fall under that rubric, but Gibson's, for example, got $400,000 or something not that long ago, so I think we probably can demonstrate just as well as Gibson's that we got some good stuff on deck.
Awesome. Thank you. And I think we've done the homework to set ourselves up for some success in this kind of opportunities. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks for your work, everybody.
Thank you.
We have one more.
One more. Devin, I'm just going to set it up here.
Jesse. Should be up in a moment. My name is Devin Kineg. I'm a municipal engineer here. I'm here tonight with council approval to award the tender for the first phase of our Buckley lift station replacement to Webco Industrial Limited for the amount of $528,600. Brief project summary. We're replacing the lift station because currently the current Buckley lift station is at the end of its service life, as identified in our sewer master plan. This contract is phase 1 and specifically focuses on the civil works of excavation, installation of underground infrastructure, and then backfill. We're breaking it into this two-phase contract or project to try and reduce the impact of the school as much as possible. We're trying to complete the excavation, as much of the excavation as possible during the summer months before school starts. That being said, we are anticipating that the completion won't be till the end of September, so we will bleed into September with this work as well. We don't anticipate any major road closures, just some single lane alternating. Access to school, though, should not be greatly impacted, and we are working in concert with the school district throughout the entire project, or we have been and we will continue to. We posted on BC Bid, and we received 3 bids. Webco Industrial is the lowest bidder. Once again, this is a unit price contract. And on top of that, Webco's proposal of $528,600 was within the range identified by our design consultant and their cost estimate. Webco was formerly Earthco, which you might remember. We worked with them in the past, and so based on their bid and on the references, internal references that we have for them, we're confident that they can successfully deliver the project. Time is of the essence on this one, so we anticipate they're going to want to start as soon as possible, and so we expect to see excavation beginning sometime around mid-August. And that's all.
Thanks. Questions? Councillor Kent?
Just any rationale on the difference in price there between the tender we accepted at 500 and there's a $200,000 difference there, basically?
Certainly, through the mayor. So the, as Jesse has mentioned in previous presentations, the climate right now is it's very difficult to get people bidding. In speaking with with Webco, they were actually very confident in their bid, and in that it met within our range. The other bidders, I didn't speak to them directly as to why they bid what they did, but it is kind of late in the season to be getting civil work like this done. And on top of that, we have a very tight schedule. But we will acknowledge that it is a very tight schedule to try and beat that school year. So that's the only rationale I can give at this point is, yeah, I think there's a lot of work. People already have a lot of work, and so they're kind of shooting high, making it worthwhile.
Oh, good for us.
Yeah.
Thanks. I don't see any more hands. Is there someone who'd like to move the recommendation? Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Just one comment. I know part of our strategy from a budgeting point of view, and maybe this is through Ms. Matthews, is to ensure that we get these tenders out earlier in the season so we don't run up. And so I'm feeling like this is a little bit late. I'm glad we're getting going. Is there something in the budget cycle that we need to even move forward even more? I mean, this is from our sewer utility. I'm just curious about why we can't get these tenders out and awarded in May rather than in July. And I'm looking at Chris's hand, but so I'll let you think about that. But Chris.
We've spoken about this recently, actually, and there are really 2 different factors. One is simply that we had significant staff turnover in the engineering department this year, and we didn't have the right bums in the right chairs to start getting this work out and the tenders out until later than we normally would. The team is doing an amazing job at getting a huge volume of work out and managing all of the tenders. So I'm really proud of the work they've done to get us this far and to get in here before the August break. But we were behind the 8 ball a little bit. There's a second factor, which is the budget cycle. I guess I'll just floated out here, but we can talk more during the budget cycle this year, that we didn't do our work program workshop with council until like a couple of weeks after the budget was passed. These large line items on sewer replacement and water replacement and active transportation are fairly locked in well before that. And I think we are talking about getting in earlier and talking to council earlier about these are the things we think that we can do with the money that's currently allocated, and then we won't tender until the budget is passed. But at that point, we can be ready to go. So I think that would save us months, and importantly, get tenders out early enough that all the contractors aren't full up with work. So I think that would be a really important change.
Particularly in the sewer and water utilities, we actually approved those bylaws quite in advance of the actual active transportation. But I think we just want to get ahead of these so we're not. So thanks for that. Christine, do you want to add to that? Or?
The only other thing I'll indicate is that the longer range planning that we do from a capital perspective, the better we are, because then it's in the existing financial plan and they can proceed to tender earlier. We did take an approach with some of our annual year-over-year budgets to not break it down with council so that the overall budget for all the departments could get out quicker. I still support that strategy. If the engineering department needs to solidify that with you sooner, I don't see any problem with that.
I just wanted to highlight that so we make sure we just keep on top of it as we move forward next year. Okay, motion's on the floor. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Next, we have the grant application submission that we can do this really quickly.
Okay. My name is Chris Wickham. I'm the Director of Engineering, and we are applying for some grants, and we are seeking a resolution to show the council supports our application for these 3 grants. The first is the National Disaster Mitigation Program. This is for projects that inform proactive disaster mitigation. And it's a multi-stream project, or a program rather. And so we are already under this program doing our Squamish River Quantitative Risk Assessment this year. And that sets us up for the next. And so the IFHMP, the Quantitative Risk Assessment, have been running us down a bit through this program. And we're actually well ahead of other municipalities, so we think that we're very well positioned for this grant opportunity. We are proposing that the Eagle Viewing Area and CHM Reserve Dike Master Plan would be the project that we put forward. It's the next item on our integrated flood hazard management plan. It's a very tricky area, so the $200,000 estimate would be 100% covered if we were successful. We have been in contact with Squamish Nation, and they've given us an informal approval, and we're looking to formalize that before we put our application in. We're working very closely with them on this as well.
So we do have to consider these individually. So I'll look for a motion that we support the National Disaster Mitigation Program for Eagle View and CHM Reserve Dike Master Plan. Moved by Councillor Carr, seconded by Councillor Elliott. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Next up,
the Disaster Mitigation and Adaptation Fund. This is a $2 billion national program. We don't get all the money. And designed to help communities withstand current and future risks of natural hazards. So they're looking for large-scale infrastructure projects, the minimum cost of $20 million. But they're open to stacking. As long as you're looking at same hazard in the same area, you can have multiple projects. And so we've actually worked with them directly to make sure that they consider our river and coastal flooding as a single item, and they do. So we're looking to basically stack all of our projects for flood protection up to 2027, which comes up to $27.5 million. The grant.
Giddy up.
Yeah, exactly. The grant would be 40% of project costs, which means we would need to budget the remaining 60%, or $1.83 million each year, which is already in line with our financial plan.
Someone want to move that? Moved by Councillor Elliott, second by Councillor Pryor. I think if we're successful, knock on wood, all the homework we've been doing in our master planning, particularly the cohesion management plan, will be well worthwhile. Yes, Councillor Pryor?
Yeah, we get that one.
I'll call the question.
There's a shooting.
Glad we stopped. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And the third one, green infrastructure, environment quality, substream wastewater treatment plant upgrade.
All right, and this one is a national program, $243 million. It provides 73.3% of funding. It's very broad-based. It was actually a little bit of a challenge to decide amongst many different potential projects we have on the books that could fit for this one. But we felt that the wastewater treatment plant upgrade project, which we're already doing a pre-design for, have in the budget and is about the right dollar value, just really fit in and had a high chance of being successful. So our portion of that would be $1.26 million, which is already supported by the financial plan as well.
Excellent. Anyone like to move that? Councillor Kent, second by Councillor Chappell. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much, Chris. Next up, looking for council to recommend that we could move forward the motion that we provide Squamish BMX a grant and aid in the amount of $15,000 to be funded by the grant monies awarded from the Whistler Blackcomb Foundation. Very quickly, this is flow-through money just to facilitate this grant from Blackcomb Foundation to BMX.
Yes, sorry to do this, but I just want to be cautious about the word flow-through. That's one of the reasons I just wanted to apprise council that when we set this thing, the reason that we put the grant and aid program in place is that under the Income Tax Act, we cannot be seen as a conduit for funds flowing through to another agency.
I didn't mean flow through.
Yeah, thank you. So just to be clear, we can act as an intermediary, but we do have to have control over the project because the lands are on district lands and because we will enter an agreement and have some form of conditional letter. We feel that we're covering ourselves from that angle and staying on the right side. We do not want to lose our charitable status.
Excellent. Someone like to move that? Moved by Councillor Pryor, second by Councillor Elliott. Call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Christine. We have a consent agenda. Any items appearing in the consent agenda which present a conflict of interest for council members or any items to be debated or voted against must be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately. I look to council to see if there's anything in the consent agenda that they'd like to have pulled for those reasons. I'll give council 2 seconds to collect their thoughts on this. Don't see any. If someone would like to move the consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Kent, seconded by, I'll second that. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Yes, it did. Yep. We are now to slate agenda items. We didn't have any. Action, correspondence action requested. We have a number of correspondence around camping in the area, and there's a recommended motion that we refer them to staff. I know staff have already followed up with these people, so it's a little redundant, but it's important to do. So for motion to refer to staff, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Elliott. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. There's a recommended motion that the removal of trees be referred to staff from Mr. Clarkson. Clarkson or Clarkson? Clarkson. Is there a mover? Moved by Councillor Black-and-Wolf, seconded by Councillor Elliott. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. I believe staff have already followed up with them as well. There's a letter from McFellows with regarding Turtle Trail funding. Move referral to the budget. Yeah, I'm suggesting we actually move it to the staff and the budget.
And the budget, okay.
Yeah, sorry. Moved by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Kent. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. And again, the council directs staff to meet with and invite a committee of the whole in the fall, representatives of the Ministry of Transportation, including operations manager, regarding intersection safety, highway speed, and other ongoing identified issues that the district has raised as significant concerns. I'll move that. Is there a second? Seconded by Councillor Elliott. Just on a little bit of an update, we actually had a meeting at noon today with MHI, Mr. Legault, and to talk about all these things in preparation for some of our memos that are going for UBCM requested meetings with the Ministry of Transportation. So we had sort of a preliminary discussion with them. So I think it's great that we follow this up with a committee meeting on those issues and keep pushing. I'll call the question. All those in move that?
Hasn't been seconded.
Seconded by Councillor Elliott, seconded by Councillor Kent, either one. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. We didn't pull any minutes from the consent agenda. Business arising from the minutes. This is a request Councillor Pryor made that one of the motions that failed at the July 3rd meeting be considered by council. Councillor Pryor, do you want to move this? Moved by Councillor Pryor. I'll second it. For discussion, Councillor Pryor.
Well, I was just thinking about the bridge going across the Amsterdam Triangle up at the north end. And we had opponents come forward trying to get their project sped up so that we could get the bridge. And it didn't pass, 3 against, 3-4. And I just kept thinking about it, and I think the bridge is a super important piece of infrastructure, and I was hoping that we could maybe get another councillor to change their mind, and we could get that bridge this year. And my big worry is we'll get a bit of a downturn, we might not see that bridge for 5 or 6 years. So I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And, we have an opportunity to get her going. Want the fact that we were breaking the rule for them prevent us from seizing the moment and getting that very important piece of infrastructure for the community. So I asked Patty to bring it back, and I thought I would plead with my fellow councillors to see if I can get anyone to change their mind. I really do believe that getting that is I just feel really strongly about it. It's been in the works for years, and it just did not pass up.
And just to clarify, the motion doesn't specifically speak to that project, but it speaks to the idea that community amenities moving up in phases and large developments could be considered as something that would take priority classification within our processing. So I just wanted to clarify that.
I believe I spoke to this at the committee meeting, but I'll speak to it again in a regular council meeting. I couldn't agree with Councillor Pryor more. There are pieces of infrastructure that this community is desperate for. It's not just about, we've been prioritizing housing, and housing is incredibly important. We also have to prioritize connectivity and infrastructure, because we can't, if we had the money and the funds to actually pay for some of this infrastructure, that'd be amazing, but we don't. So we rely on large projects to bring some of that infrastructure in, and I would agree with Councillor Pryor that I'm hoping that we can, this is just asking staff bring back options for prioritizing critical infrastructure needs and being able to incorporate it into the development process. And it is one way to, and we can always say no when it comes forward, but to actually have a process where infrastructure needs are addressed in housing is, I think, a prudent idea.
Councillor Elliott, then Councillor Blackenwell.
In reflecting back on our lengthy conversation at committee on this topic, I hear you plead, Councillor Pryor, but it's not just about that one development. This is a broader motion about prioritizing infrastructure in our priority development application process. I still don't see a way that is predictable, or how you designate those projects. We have a DCC bylaw. We have put things in our zoning bylaw and DP areas to show developers the standards we're asking for. The priority development process was in place when that particular rezoning came forward. They chose not to include affordable housing. And so I think there's other mechanisms to make sure those critical infrastructure projects go forward. So I won't support the motion.
Councillor Blackmore.
Yeah, I think I would really like to see them build that bridge, and I wish that the applicant had a way of just doing that anyway without further changes to the way our approval process works. And I just think that it opens the door for a much more convoluted approval process for development. And as I've said before, on other occasions, on other matters, I want developers to be bringing their best proposal forward at first reading every time. And, you know, they'll have to make that assessment. If they think that the community is really in favor of a key piece of infrastructure, then I'd like to see the proposal have that in an earlier phase. And that's something that, you know, an applicant has to work out, but I don't think it's impossible. I do think that there is a way for these things to be done, and would reflect on the fact that you know, pricing and terms have changed quite a bit since the Scott Crescent was approved initially. So I would think they might have more financial latitude at this point.
I mean, just, I don't see any planners in the room, but I mean, both my fellow councillors talked about other ways of getting this critical infrastructure, but we don't have any at this point. That development doesn't have any. And when they brought their original development forward, the 370 units for approval, we didn't have any of this stuff, so they brought in a development of 10 units, and so we're holding their feet to the fire on 370 units for a 10-unit rezone. It wasn't the 375-unit rezone. And so anyway, I mean, it doesn't matter which way you cut it. I'm just saying that if any development wants to come forward that's got a critical piece of infrastructure, in the bylaw, the way it stands right now, they don't get to come forward because they have to have 30% affordable rentals. The critical infrastructure doesn't cut it. And so unless we allow people to say, well, I'm not going to give you 30% infrastructure, but I'm going to give you X plus a million, and we'll go, oh, well, yeah, we'd like that X plus a million, but we don't have any wording in any document to allow that at this point. And anyway, I just feel really strongly that we don't get this bridge now, we might not get this bridge. So, I mean, that's the way it is. It's up to you, Pete.
So I'll take a crack at this, and I've got Councillor Chappell on the speakers list. I generally agree that we have an expectation that developers come with their best proposal. I think we all know that that's never the case, but we're trying to work towards it for sure. I think this is worth considering is that developers will often, at the time, come forward with what they think is their best proposal. It's based on market conditions of the day and that kind of thing, how quickly they can sell something. And then markets speed up like they have, certainly since the Kingswood development was put forward. And they're like, oh, we want to speed up. And so they're trying to figure out ways to do that. Obviously, this developer could come back and propose some purpose-built rental, and that would 30%, and that would move his process forward more quickly. But I do think, as Councillor Chappell sort of articulated, that on key infrastructure priorities, I see this bridge as one of them, that it's worth considering how developers may move that forward. They may think that they can move that forward now because the market conditions are actually more amenable to them getting that money up front, either from their lender or from their return on sales. So I think we do have to be a little bit sensitive to that. And I think the jeopardy in something that, if something like this moves forward, is that developers will hold back pieces theoretically in their development proposals so they can throw that as a bone later in the process. So obviously that's something that I think we have to be cognizant of. That's something they could do with affordable housing and all these things as well. But I do think it's worthwhile having consideration of key infrastructure moving up so we get it sooner rather than later. And I agree with Councillor Pryor, you know, if markets change, we may not see this bridge for 5 or 8, 10 years. So I do think we need to open up our process to allow for opportunity to take advantage of some of these situations. It's a tough one. There's no right or wrong answer here for council. It's a tough one because I think there are things we want to keep our eye on if this does move forward. Councillor Shelby, Councillor Allen.
Just one point on the motion. This only directs staff to bring back options. It doesn't set forward policy or say that we're going to do anything. I'd like to see some innovative options in policy, and maybe we have ways that we can change small things that infrastructure projects can come forward earlier. Just directing staff to bring back options for prioritizing critical infrastructure needs. There may be some innovative policy that's already been done elsewhere that might be of interest, and it could be a committee of the whole discussion and bring up some innovative ways to get some infrastructure that our community needs.
I think that's part of the follow-up that we're asking for.
That's right, but I'm just wondering, councillors that are opposing the motion, just to ask staff to bring back.
Yeah.
It's like it.
Councillor Bennett? Okay, and then Councillor Kent, did I see your hand? Okay.
I think there's ways for us to demonstrate what our priority infrastructure projects are without adding them to our priority development application process. We can't make everything a priority in the development application process, or we've got space for 5, and there's a reason for that, because you've got to reach a high bar, and we've got to prioritize a few things, not many things, a few things. I think we can help developers by saying, these are our priority infrastructure projects, so if you're doing a development in the neighborhood, these are the things we're looking for. But I don't think it should be part of our priority development application process. I think we'll become the Wild West of development, potentially, because it's very difficult to identify what is key infrastructure, and it leaves too much up to the discretion of councillors to be sold on things that aren't actually a priority. So I still disagree with this. I think we've got ostensibly 6 weeks left in our term, and we've got a whole bunch of things that we want to get done, and this isn't a priority for me right now.
I would be interested in seeing what those options might be. I mean, that's merely the motion that's being put forward, to see what the options are. I'm willing to consider that.
Councillor Pryor.
I just wanted to follow up on something that Councillor Elliott said. It's discretion of council. He said we have too many things for council to, but it's discretion of council. You're speaking for me and the whole council. I don't think we have too many things. If somebody wants to come along with a really good idea on something, I want to listen.
First reading. Councillor Pryor, I'm going to ask you to just speak to the chair.
Yeah. So, if something comes along, and yes, at first reading, I agree that we should be talking about it at first reading, but we're talking about a 375 unit development that had a 10 unit change, and that's not first reading. That's a long time ago. So this, to me, it might not be a priority to some councillors, but the climbing community and the trail networking and the kids that are getting from Valley Cliff to downtown, it's an incredibly important piece of infrastructure. So I want any developer to bring stuff like that forward for council's discretion.
I'm going to call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Elliott and Councillor Blackman will oppose. Motion carries. Thank you, Councilor Pryor. Committee minutes and reports, we didn't remove anything from the consent agenda. Council, staff and camera announcements, we don't have any. There is no unscheduled public attendance. Open question period for clarification related to agenda items. No media in the room, so we don't even have that. Council or staff announcements? It's been a busy month already. There was a beer festival, there was the BC Heritage Fair ceremony. Went to that at the Britannia Museum, and kids from all over the province here with some of the best heritage presentations and proposals showcased there. It was so awesome. I spent way too long there chatting with, I was a bit of a history fair geek myself way back in the day, and just had these wonderfully smart, engaged young people from around the province in the area, and they had a great time. The hosts, the Yank Center team did a great job. They went down to a discussion with Parliamentary Secretary Blair regarding federal rolling out of the cannabis discussions. We had shared some of what he was saying. Nothing overly new, but just the message that this really is the beginning of the process for the federal government, and there will be lots of changes in these regulations over the next 1-2 years. Met with 2 young, wonderful students. We have an exchange. There's an exchange program that comes to town every year from kids from Nunavut that come to Squamish and work here, and met with them. They always have great questions. They absolutely love the community, and Ken Perry does a great job of hosting those kids, and we give them bus passes and rec passes, so they're enjoying the town as much as possible. Wind Festival is coming up. There was Kite Clash. I mean, it's just been an insane month already. And what's up this weekend? There's something else this weekend. I'm trying to blank what it is. Arc'teryx Climbing Festival is on this weekend. It's never a dull moment in Squamish.
It's the grand opening of the Bat Condo on the 21st.
Awesome.
Down at the estuary.
Fantastic.
And that was built by the Men's Shed as a volunteer project, and it can house over 3,000 mama bats.
3,000, wow, that's quite the condo.
So mosquitoes, look out.
Yeah, we have a bat condo at the cottage in Ontario. They're pretty cool. Not 3,000, but holy cow. Any other things that council needs updating on? Nope. We are motion to adjourn. Moved by Councilor Kent, second by Councilor Pryor. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries.